Chapter 829. At this time, as long as old madam didn't punish her, Xiao Jie was willing to do anything. After leaving with sweat all over her head, she stood at the gate of the courtyard, angry and annoyed. Why had she been frightened by Xiao Wanru just now? She couldn't even say a word. "Miss," the servant girl said timidly. "Let's go." Xiao Jie gritted her teeth and turned to leave. After she finished copying the women's precepts that old madam had ordered, she would go to Xiao Wanru to talk about it. She didn't believe that there would be no chance to talk about it. Not only would she talk about it, but she would also talk about it when there were many people, forcing Xiao Wanru to agree so that she could please old madam. Thinking of old madam's promise, Xiao Jie was very tempted. This was her chance, and she would not give up. In the main room, Xiao Zaihuan stood with her head lowered. She was also very flustered and confused. There were some things she knew and some things she didn't know. She had also guessed that the only thing she had done before was to take Xiao Wanru there. In this regard, she could be considered to have accomplished it. Unlike Xiao Jie, she didn't want to get involved in this kind of thing at all. But because it was not difficult, she didn't care and agreed. At this time, she regretted it very much. If she had known that this matter would become like this, she would never have gotten involved. In fact, this matter had nothing to do with her. Anyway, whether the first branch or the second branch was the heir of the duke, it had nothing to do with the third branch. But it was her father's order, so she felt that it was not difficult, so she agreed. "Grandma." Seeing old madam's gloomy face, Xiao Zaihuan called her. "You can leave now," old madam said coldly. Xiao Zaihuan wanted to say something, but after looking at old madam's face, she didn't say anything more. She didn't want to get involved in this matter. Since her grandma didn't ask her to do anything, it was the best. Xiao Zaihuan came out of the main room with her servant girl. After standing in the yard and thinking for a while, she went out of the yard and went straight to Xiao Wanru's Piaoyun courtyard. She had to explain to Xiao Wanru that she really didn't know it would become like this. When she arrived at the Piaoyun courtyard, she stepped into the courtyard and saw Nanny Yu coming over with a smile. She bowed to her and said, "Third miss. Has fifth sister come back?" Xiao Zaihuan said anxiously. She was really anxious, for fear that something would happen at this time and she would be blamed again. "Our young mistress has returned," Nanny Yu answered with a smile. "That's good." Xiao Zaihuan breathed a sigh of relief and was about to leave. "I'll go and see fifth sister." "Third miss, please wait a minute." Nanny Yu stepped back and blocked Xiao Zaihuan's way. Xiao Zaihuan stood still, looked at Nanny Yu in confusion and asked, "Is there anything else?" "Not really, but our young mistress was very tired when she came back just now. She has already laid down to rest for a while. Third young mistress, please come back later." Nanny Yu smiled and refused. Xiao Zaihuan looked up at the sky. The lunch break had passed, and Xiao Wanru basically didn't rest. But she actually took a break today. It was very fake. But even if she knew it was fake, Xiao Zaihuan couldn't force her way in. She could only smile and say, "Since fifth sister is resting, I'll come to see her later and explain to her." After saying that, she turned around helplessly. She really didn't want to offend Xiao Wanru at all, so she specially came to Xiao Wanru to reconcile and explain. "See you, third miss," Nanny Yu said with an excellent attitude with a smile. She looked at Xiao Zaihuan's back, bowed, and then watched her leave. After seeing her go out of the courtyard and disappear at the intersection ahead, Nanny Yu turned around and returned to the main room. In the main room, Xiao Wanru sat under the window and looked out of the window with deep eyes. She clearly saw the scene when Xiao Zaihuan came over just now. The gauze curtain fell, and the people inside could see outside, but the people outside could not see inside clearly. Third miss has gone back," Yu Jie said. Xiao Wanru nodded, picked up the teacup on the table, took a sip, and then slowly put it down. She leaned back in the chair, and her eyes became colder and colder. At that moment, she did want to refuse bluntly, but inexplicably, she suddenly thought of another thing. She immediately agreed and then left decisively, not even giving Xiao Jie a chance to speak. It had been a long time since the previous thing happened. For such a long time, she didn't see anyone take action. She was negligent. She thought that they didn't have the idea of Chu Huan Courtyard anymore. She didn't expect that they would mention it at this critical time. She almost fell into their trap. These people were really unscrupulous. Miss, what should we do now? Yu Jie, who had been with Xiao Wanru just now, also sensed the atmosphere that was on the verge of breaking out. At this time, she couldn't help looking at Xiao Wanru's beautiful and cold side face and asked. Xiao Wanru picked up the teacup and took another sip. After putting down the teacup, she looked at the light smoke curling up from the teacup and said slowly, "Go and ask Qing, or come here." Now, the only one who could secretly spread the news was Qing. "I'll go and ask Qing, or come here right away," Yu Jie said, turned around and happened to meet Nanny Yu. She nodded at Nanny Yu silently and winked at the main room, indicating that Miss was angry. Nanny Yu nodded with a smile to show that she got it. The two of them passed each other. Nanny Yu lifted the curtain and came in. Seeing Xiao Wanru sitting in front of the window, she knew that Xiao Wanru must have seen the scene just now. "Miss, the third Miss has gone back, but she will come again later," Nanny Yu reported. "If she comes again, tell her that I haven't woken up yet and go back to sleep." Xiao Wanru suddenly smiled with the corners of her lips raised. Her smile was no longer clear and even a little cold. Nanny Yu hesitated for a moment, but still said, "Miss, if the third Miss keeps coming in the future, shall we always say this?" Xiao Zaihuan looked like the kind of person who would not give up. She would definitely come again and would not give up until she saw her master. "Nanny Yu, why do you think the third sister came?" Xiao Wanru suddenly asked lazily. Recently, Xiao Zaihuan had been too enthusiastic to her and had a good relationship with her. Judging from what had happened in the palace, it was impossible for Xiao Zaihuan to have such a good relationship with her. What had happened in the palace would eventually affect Xiao Zaihuan. She, who should have been in trouble, was not in trouble. Even if Xiao Zaihuan did not have real evidence, she would definitely suspect her, instead of acting as if she was on good terms with her at the moment. Just like what had happened today, Xiao Zaihuan should also know something, but she should only know a little, so she was anxious to explain it to her. Although she was the daughter of the eldest branch, Xiao Zaihuan was not inferior. She was the daughter of the third branch, and now the person in charge of the mansion was the third madam. Xiao Zaihuan did not need to be humble in front of her at all. Not only was she humble, but she was also very gentle, which was a feeling that Xiao Zaihuan had never given Xiao Wanru in the past. "I'm not sure." Nanny Yu shook her head. She really couldn't guess why the third Miss and her master got along so well. Before they entered the palace, the relationship between the third young mistress and her young mistress was quite good, but not to this extent. During this period of time, Nanny Yu also noticed that the third young mistress gave priority to her young mistress. As long as her young mistress said it, the third young mistress would definitely agree. Moreover, she helped her young mistress with satisfaction. It could be said that she had no selfish motives at all. She couldn't figure out what the third Miss meant. "Nanny Yu, do you remember when the third Miss became nice to me?" Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and reminded Nanny Yu as well as herself. Did she do anything to make Xiao Zaihuan feel that it was profitable? But she didn't think that she had done anything recently that could make Xiao Zaihuan feel that it was profitable. It had been a few days since she was granted the marriage. If Xiao Zaihuan didn't come to court her, then it was not about the marriage. "Miss, I have something to say, but I don't know if it's true." Being asked by Xiao Wanru, Nanny Yu suddenly thought of something and said after hesitating for a moment. In fact, she really didn't know whether it was true or not, so she didn't dare to say it. "Nanny Yu, tell me." Xiao Wanru said gently. There were no outsiders in the room. Even if Nanny Yu said something terrible, no one would know. This. Nanny Yu was still a little hesitant, but after thinking about it, she felt that she had to tell her master about it. Originally, she thought that it must be false, but after hearing her master's words just now, she thought that it might be true. "I heard that when Prince Chen sent the betrothal gifts in person that day, both the third Miss and the fourth Miss went to see them. And then..." Xiao Wanru didn't understand for a moment. She tilted her head and asked with a charming raise of her eyebrows. "After that, I heard that the fourth Miss went back early, but the third Miss didn't come back until His Highness went back." Nanny Yu said meaningfully. Xiao Wanru didn't understand the meaning of her words at first. She blinked her watery eyes blankly and looked at Nanny Yu's strange expression for a long time before she realized it. She pursed her cherry lips and asked at a loss, "Could it be that third sister has been hiding there all the time?" "It seems to be the case. At that time, I didn't pay much attention to it and thought it was impossible. But now seeing that the third miss is humble to you and wants to please you, I think maybe it is true," Nanny Yu said more and more vaguely. Xiao Wanru couldn't accept such a news for a moment. She could imagine all kinds of reasons, but she had never thought of such a reason. It was said that Xiao Jie wanted to send her the betrothal gifts. Xiao Jie's betrothal meant that she was going to marry into Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. It was impossible for her to be the legal wife, so she could only be a side concubine. If she were to be a side concubine, Chu Qing, who was also the son of the former emperor, had no advantage in other aspects, although he was in better health than Chu Luqian. Moreover, Chu Luqian sent the betrothal gifts in person that day, which dispelled the rumor that he might die at any time. In terms of these aspects, Chu Luqian completely defeated Chu Qing. Chapter 830. Therefore, if Xiao Caihuan approved the marriage offered by Xiao Jie, she might really fall in love with Chu Luqian. What was more, even if Xiao Wanru had been reborn, she had to admit that Chu Luqian was as a handsome young man coming out of a painting, with a kind of elegant and gentle appearance. Of course, the appearance was just an appearance. It was just a superficial phenomenon that could be seen on the surface. She lowered her watery eyes and remained silent for a while. Her long eyelashes cast uneven shadows under her eyes, making her look a little tired. "Miss Qing is here." Yu Jie's voice broke the silence in the room. Xiao Wanru raised her head and nodded to Nanny Yu, indicating that she already knew. Seeing Yu Jie come in with Qing, Nanny Yu knew that Xiao Wanru had something to tell her, so she left. "Qing, are your men around?" Xiao Wanru took a deep breath, suppressed the trace of displeasure in her heart, and raised her eyes to ask. When in the Yuhui nunnery, it was relatively easy for Qing to mobilize the men given by Chu Luqian. But here was Duke Xing's mansion. Xiao Wanru didn't know whether it was convenient for Qing to mobilize the men given by Chu Luqian. "Miss, you can send me out to the mansion to have a look, and then I can find them," Qing said. "Okay, send them in at night, and they can come to the mansion after nightfall." Xiao Wanru nodded. It was very easy to send Qing out to have a look. "Miss, do you want to inform His Highness?" Qing said uneasily. "No." Xiao Wanru shook her head, paused and said, "You can definitely send the news, right?" "Definitely, miss. Don't worry." Qing nodded. Although it was inconvenient for the men sent to protect her in the Yuhui nunnery to enter Duke Xing's mansion during the day, they had been guarding outside the mansion for fear that something would happen. If something happened at night, they could still enter Duke Xing's mansion. "Go out and buy some candied plums for me. Tell them that I have a bad taste and need some. The candied plums in the mansion are not to my taste." "Miss, I understand." Little Qing took Xiao Wanru's order and left. She was not a first-class servant girl, so it was easier for her to go in and out than Yu Jie and the others. "Miss, do you have anything to do tonight?" Looking at Qing's back, Yu Jie lowered her voice and asked carefully. "Since you have brought it up, you have to find a way to force me to do it before you achieve your goal. After a few days, let alone grandma, even I can think of a way to deal with it," Xiao Wanru said in a low voice as if she was talking to herself. "Miss?" Yu Jie became more and more confused. She thought for a while and asked doubtfully, "Do you mean that old madam and second miss still have a backup plan?" In old madam's room, Yu Jie clearly saw that what the second miss was going to say should be related to old madam. Every time the second miss decided to say something, she would subconsciously look at old madam. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and did not explain anymore. In fact, she was not very sure. However, tonight should be a key point. If Xiao Yanru wanted to start with her, she could send him away with the excuse that she was resting. So what should she do to make it inevitable? Looking at Xiao Wanru's faint smile and cold face, Yu Jie couldn't help but have an ominous feeling in her heart. Although it was already spring, the weather was still very cold, especially at night. It was so cold that people felt shivering. If there was nothing else to do, everyone went back to rest early. No one wanted to stay outside on such a cold day with a hot quilt. As soon as night fell, the lights in many courtyards went out. Xiao Jie's room was also lit up, but it was not bright. This was a wing room. The new house had not been decorated yet, so it was so messy that it was almost difficult to stay here. This courtyard was indeed not a good place. It was just casually decorated, and there was no heating device in the wing room. Although Xiao Jie was holding a hand warmer, she was still shivering with cold, so it was impossible for her to write a few words. She asked the servant girl to push away the things around to make more space. Then she went to fetch a hand warmer, and the room became a little warmer. "Miss, are we really going to stay here all night?" The servant girl Liu Xiang coughed a few times and asked. The coal in the hand warmer was not good. It made people cough, especially when they got close to it. She went to ask for coal just now, but she didn't get any good ones. "Let's stay here first." Xiao Jie seemed to have a much better temper. Although she was still shivering with cold, she was not as hot-tempered as before. Liu Xiang remembered that when she went to fetch the coal just now, Miss was still angry and kept scolding the 5th Miss and the 3rd Mississippi. At this time, Xiao Jie didn't scold anyone. Instead, she warmed her hands and seemed to be about to write. In fact, there were only a few words written on the paper on the table, and there were only spots of ink. Xiao Jie narrowed her eyes and warmed her hands again. She wanted to pull her hands away from the hand warmer. As soon as she left her hands, she immediately shivered with cold. She walked to the desk, picked up the pen, and felt that her fingers were stiff. Holding the pen, she stood in front of the table for a while. Suddenly, an idea came to her mind and she scribbled on the paper with the pen in her hand. "Miss, old madam will find out." Liu Xiang was so scared that her face changed. Her master was not favored, and she, as a servant girl, was certainly not favored. Although concubine Lu helped to manage the affairs and she, the servant girl of the 2nd Miss, had stood up, she had not adjusted her mentality. At this time, she panicked and came to hold Xiao Jie's hand. "Miss, please write well. Old madam will not let you stay here and copy books all the time." Liu Xiang held Xiao Jie's hand and begged. Not only would Miss be punished, but they, the servants who followed Miss, would also be punished. Maybe they would be beaten a few times, or even sold. Thinking of the previous servant girls who followed 2nd Miss and ended up being sold, Liu Xiang really couldn't be tough. Every time when the 2nd Miss lost her temper and made trouble, they, the servant girls, were always at a disadvantage. However, the 2nd Miss still didn't understand the situation. She immediately became arrogant when she was a little proud. In the end, not only she was unlucky, but also the servant girls who followed her. "What are you afraid of? It's all right this time," Xiao Jie said indifferently. She pushed away Liu Xiang's hand, took away the paper on the top, and continued to drip ink on the paper below and scribble. Liu Xiang trembled like a fallen leaf in the wind. Her face was pale and she cried, "Little sister." It was not the first time that Xiao Jie said, "It's all right this time." Liu Xiang didn't believe what Xiao Jie said at all. "Don't worry. These will be burned later. It's good to see some ink. Who knows if I wrote or scribbled randomly at this time." Xiao Jie became more and more indifferent. Thinking of the old maid who secretly came to convey the message of old madam, she raised the corner of her mouth and felt very proud. Why can't you see it?" Liu Xiang was not a very smart servant girl. In fact, she couldn't be smart with such a master. The smart servant girls had been killed by Xiao Jie, and the Madam of Jiang didn't intend to keep a few smart and capable servant girls for her. In a while, the fire is going to burn. Who will care about what I wrote here? It's good enough that they can save me. Xiao Jie looked at the beam above her head and clicked her tongue. This house doesn't look good, but it's actually not bad. Liu Xiang still didn't understand Xiao Jie's words, but she heard the word save in Xiao Jie's words. This time, she was so scared that she almost collapsed to the ground. She stammered and asked, "Little Miss, why do you need someone to save you? Is it because of the fire? Then let's run quickly." Liu Xiang connected the words before and after, and it was a little interesting. Don't run now. Wait a little longer. Xiao Jie lowered her head and scribbled again, one after another. She had a great time playing with it. It was rare that she looked calm and didn't panic at all. Wait until when? Miss Tai, why is the fire burning? Liu Xiang still didn't understand. She looked around carefully. There were some messy furniture around, which was not well handled. It was very messy. In the darkness, it seemed that there were many shadows. Liu Xiang was very scared. She was cold and scared, and her upper and lower gums couldn't help but tremble. Miss. Seeing that Xiao Jie ignored her, Liu Xiang said again. Don't keep calling me. It's annoying. Xiao Jie said unhappily. Of course, the fire had to burn, and it was she who said it. She was not in a hurry at all. Old Madam also meant to wait. It couldn't be too early. Otherwise, it would be bad if the fire was extinguished in a short time when too many people came. Little Miss. Liu Xiang called again, and her eyes flashed timidly. What's over there? What over there? Xiao Jie said in annoyance. It's over there, outside the window. I seem to see a white figure. Liu Xiang pointed out of the window, and the sound of her upper and lower gums became louder and louder. Even Xiao Jie heard it. She subconsciously looked out of the window, and there was nothing in the dark sky. There is Liu Xiang suddenly screamed, and hugged her head and curled up. Xiao Jie went to see her first. When she heard what Liu Xiang said, she hurriedly looked back, but still saw nothing. Even so, Xiao Jie was afraid. Holding the pen in her hand, she felt that the bottom of her hand was cold and stiff. Don't talk nonsense. Trying to calm down the panic in her heart, Xiao Jie snapped. Miss, I'm not talking nonsense. There was a white figure just now, and a ghost face flashed by the window. Miss is not far from you. Liu Xiang was so scared that she cried. She whimpered and hugged herself, shaking hard. Xiao Jie also shivered. Liu Xiang had never lied to her, but when she looked back, she didn't see anything. Suddenly, she thought of some rumors in the past, saying that the mansion was haunted. Xiao Jie sat on the chair in a panic and didn't even dare to raise her head. She also shivered with a d-d-d sound. After a long while, she made a big decision. She gritted her teeth and stood up. She tried her best to drag her feet and walked to the table where the oil lamp was placed. She picked up the oil lamp and lit up a curtain that had fallen beside her. She didn't dare to wait any longer. Chapter 8:31. After lighting the curtain, Xiao Jie went to light some messy things on the side, which were all flammable sundries. After lighting them slightly, they were set on fire. Liu Xiang was frightened by the slowly rising temperature in the room and let go of her hand. She looked at Xiao Jie, who was still lighting the fire, in astonishment. This time, she was so scared that her hands and feet trembled. She almost stared blankly at Xiao Wenru lighting the fire in the room. The fire in the room burned fiercely. The light and temperature of the fire made Xiao Jie's fear disappear. Hearing the sound behind her, she turned around and saw Liu Xiang staring at her with a pair of dead fish eyes. She said angrily, "Come over and help me. Push some of the flammable furniture over there." Miss. Liu Xiang didn't know where the strength came from. She jumped up and pounced on Xiao Jie, knocking Xiao Jie against a cabinet. The oil lamp in her hand fell to the ground and burned Xiao Jie's dress, causing Xiao Jie to scream. "Hurry up, put out the fire for me." Liu Xiang hurriedly put out the fire on Xiao Jie's dress and said anxiously, "Miss, what should we do now?" She was so scared and nervous that she didn't think of the white shadow she saw at the window just now. "Let's go." Looking at the fire that had been set on fire, Xiao Jie kicked hard a few times and finally extinguished the fire on her body. She covered her nose and rushed out. After being stunned for a moment, Liu Xiang turned around and ran out with Xiao Jie at an extremely fast speed. By the time they arrived at the courtyard, the previous room was already burning. Standing in the courtyard, they could still feel the warmth of the fire. "Miss." Liu Xiang wanted to speak again. Don't talk nonsense. First make yourself look like you escaped from the fire, and then find a place to hide. Xiao Jie ordered. He took a few steps forward and walked to the window, intending to set himself on fire again. Unexpectedly, just as he reached the window, he heard Liu Xiang scream behind him. Just as he was about to turn around, he received a heavy blow on his head. His body went limp and he slowly fell to the ground. A man with a white cloth on his body came out. He pulled off the white cloth and turned out to be a masked man in black. He held one person in each hand and carried them into the darkness. This was just right. He didn't have to spend any effort to meet Fifth Miss's requirements. The fire started, and the blazing fire shone far away in the night, which immediately alarmed some people who hadn't slept yet. Seeing the fire, they knew that the water was gone and shouted loudly. Someone beat the gongs and drums, and the whole Duke Xing's mansion was woken up. When the servants heard that there was a fire, they hurriedly got up and carried buckets of various sizes to extinguish it. This courtyard was a little more remote and was close to the Prime Minister's mansion. The people in the Prime Minister's mansion had already been alarmed. When Duke Xing's mansion was on fire, when Shiqi was just an examinee. This kind of thing had nothing to do with him, but now he had to come over when he saw it. The officials of the Ministry of Justice were supposed to deal with such public security issues. When he came over, the people of Duke Xing's mansion had already been in a mess, and no one noticed that he had brought a few people to help. When they arrived at the site of the fire, they saw that Duke Xing had been waiting there for a long time. Besides Duke Xing, First Young Master Xiaohua, and Third Master of Duke Xing's mansion were also there. When they saw Wen Shiqi, they all knew that he was here to help. After thanking him, they asked his people to join the crowd to put out the fire. How did the fire start? Wen Shiqi frowned and asked as a matter of routine. I don't know. It was fine, but it suddenly caught fire. All the furniture is inside. Xiaohua answered with a pale face. No one's new house would look good if it was burned. Who lives here? Has she been rescued? When Shiqi was concerned about something else. Looking at the fire in front of him, he asked. This was originally going to be my wedding house. Now there is no one living here. But just now my grandmother sent a message saying that second sister is copying the women's precepts in it, and we haven't found her yet. Xiaohua answered, looking a little angry and annoyed. Haven't found her yet? When Shiqi was stunned and asked anxiously. No, but there is no one inside. I don't know where second sister is. Xiaohua also looked very anxious. I'll go and have a look. When Shiqi said and was about to go forward to have a look. But he was stopped by Xiaohua. Everything inside has been burned. Now even the beams of the house may collapse. You can't go in. While speaking as if to prove Xiaohua's words, a loud sound came. The house in the middle really collapsed, splashing some sparks. Many people jumped up to beat off the sparks on their bodies. It's too dangerous here. Duke Xing's Xiao Jing said loudly, while ordering people to pull back those who had been close to the house. The other houses were also unreliable. As the beams of the main house collapsed, other houses also collapsed soon. As soon as the people on their side retreated a little further, the houses collapsed one after another, and sparks splashed out. Fortunately, everyone had listened to Duke Xing's words and retreated a lot earlier, so that no one was hurt. Seeing that most of the houses had collapsed, Duke Xing ordered people to water the fire. This is your wedding house. Why did you choose it here? When Shiqi looked at the location of the courtyard and then looked at its size and asked in confusion. The size and location of this courtyard obviously didn't match Xiaohua's identity. It didn't look like a place where the eldest son of lineal descent should live. It was more suitable for an ordinary miss in the mansion, or even a miss of lineal descent would not live in such a courtyard. After all, he was the eldest son of lineal descent and the heir to the family business. How could he live in such a place? I didn't find a suitable place at the moment. Xiaohua's attention was all on the fire. Hearing Wen Shiqi's question, he answered casually. How could it be gone? Don't you have several big empty courtyards in your mansion? Isn't it more decent and suitable than this one? When Shiqi became more and more confused. He knew Duke Xing's mansion well and knew that there were not many masters in Duke Xing's mansion. There were many empty courtyards, so it was impossible to choose such a place. Xiao Huan reached out to rub his forehead and said impatiently, "Grandma asked me to choose one randomly, so I chose this one randomly." His words made Wen Shiqi silent for a while. After a long while, he said, "You are too casual." "I am indeed too casual. I should have seen it clearly at the beginning. It's too late to regret now. There is not only my own furniture in it, but also the furniture sent by Minister Zhao's mansion. This is troublesome." Xiao Hua said regretfully. When newlyweds got married, it was the groom's responsibility to decorate the bridal chamber. However, some women who loved their daughters would send some furniture that their daughters liked. This was what Minister Zhao's mansion did. "It's indeed a little troublesome." When Shiqi nodded. He also felt that it was not easy to deal with this matter. It was okay to burn their own things, but if the bride's things were burned in this way, they should at least give a reasonable explanation and apologize. For this reason, Duke Xing's mansion was in a much weaker position. Even if the bride's family put forward some other conditions, Duke Xing's mansion had to agree. After all, Duke Xing's mansion had burned all the bride's furniture. For a daughter from an aristocratic family like this, the dowry had been prepared long ago, and some furniture had been prepared since the birth of the daughter. Now, it was really unreasonable for them to burn so many years of painstaking efforts of the bride's family. Minister Zhao is a good person. When Shiqi comforted Xiao Hua, they had been friends for many years, so they were straightforward and didn't need to beat around the bush. "I can only hope so," Xiao Hua said with a wry smile. He spread out his hands and didn't know what to do. With such a big fire, even the furniture left might be unusable. The first batch of furniture sent to decorate the bridal chamber had all been burned. When Shiqi turned his eyes to the fire, at this time, the fire had weakened. Basins of water were poured on it, and there were only sporadic flames left. It should not be a big problem. Did someone deliberately try to destroy your bridegroom's yard again? When Shiqi asked as something inexplicably flashed across his mind. 3 years ago, the fire in Duke Xing's mansion was a case of arson. What was happening now was also a case of arson. At that time, it was the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion who was recognized in the fire, but now it was the 2nd miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Was there any connection between them? When Shiqi inexplicably felt that there was a connection between the two fires. "My yard is not a good place. Who would think of burning it down? Besides, there is no one in the yard except my second sister, who is being punished. I heard from my grandmother that it was because my second sister made a mistake here that my grandmother punished her to copy the women's precepts in the side room at night." Xiao Huan shook his head and said bluntly. He didn't hide anything from Wen Shiqi. "Your second sister made a mistake?" Wen Shiqi felt that there was something behind it, so he repeated and asked. He glanced sideways at Xiao Huan. "It's not a big deal. It's just that my second sister and third sister quarreled with each other in my chamber, as well as people from Minister Zhao's mansion. Later, my grandmother was very angry and punished my second sister." Xiao Huan said vaguely. It didn't mean that he didn't believe Wen Shiqi, but some words were related to the reputation of the girls in the inner courtyard. Even if they were good friends, he had to stop mentioning it. When Shiqi understood, he knew what kind of person Xiao Jie was when he was young. When the two mansions played together, Xiao Jie was not a pleasing person. She would flatter those who were of a higher status than her. She would be at her beck and call as if she was a little servant girl. She would do whatever she was told and never dare to disobey. However, she was very mean to those who were inferior to her. She would trample on them ruthlessly and get carried away. "Didn't third Miss Xiao punish you?" When Shiqi keenly grasped this point and asked. As a friend, he shouldn't ask more questions. It was enough for him to understand. However, as an official of the Ministry of Justice present, he had to continue asking. In fact, not only third sister, but also fifth sister. Xiao Hua also seemed to be in a dilemma. Speaking of this, he stopped and seemed to realize that he had said something indiscreet. He pursed his lips and said, "Yuan Qing, don't ask more questions. These things in the inner courtyard have nothing to do with what is happening now. There is no need to investigate it." Chapter 8:32. Since I've seen it, I have to investigate it. Otherwise, when the Ministry of Justice asks about it, it will be embarrassing if I don't know anything even though I'm right next to your house. When Shichi said slowly and methodically, "You'd better tell me what's going on. It's better for us to talk about it than to ask your sisters. Now the second miss of your mansion is missing. If something really happens to her, it will be a murder case." Even if the victim's family didn't come to report the murder case, the Ministry of Justice would definitely investigate it since they were there. When Shichi used both the carrot and the stick in his words, but there was another meaning in it. Xiao In glanced at him with a wry smile and said helplessly, "What do you want to know? Just say it. In fact, it's my grandmother who told me about it. As for whether it's true or not, it may be because of my grandmother's prejudice, so you can't take it seriously. Just say it. I can tell it clearly." When Shichi nodded and dispelled his concerns. Seeing that when Shichi was acting in a businesslike manner, Xiaohua was also helpless, so he described what had happened before in the words of Old Madam. In Old Madam's words, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Wanru came to pick on Xiao Jie, when she was decorating the new house for Xiaohua. They said that the yard was too small and that they had to move to a new house. However, since the new house had been chosen, it was impossible for them to move to another one. However, they didn't give up and even brought up the first miss of Minister Zhao's mansion. When they were quarreling fiercely, someone from Minister Zhao's mansion came. Hearing the sisters quarreling about the first miss of Zhao, the people from Minister Zhao's mansion were very angry and brought the matter to Old Madam. That's the cause of the matter. Second sister was punished because of this. She was asked to copy the women's precepts in my yard. Xiao sighed with a headache and said, "It was really a headache to talk about it. It seems that the second miss didn't do anything wrong. It was the third miss and the fifth miss who made mistakes. Why didn't the two misses punish them, but the second miss?" After hearing Xiao Huan's words, when Shichi asked after thinking for a while, "You know that our mother is not in the mansion now, and eldest sister is not here either, so the matter of choosing a new house was entrusted to second sister. This courtyard was also chosen by second sister. Grandmother also felt that second sister did not choose well. Although third sister and fifth sister were wrong to find fault, it was also for my own good. She wanted to choose a big courtyard for me. Grandmother said that it was fine if second sister did not choose well, but she did not dare to change." "How?" When Shichi asked. "I'm not sure either. Maybe she was asked to pick again, and then she was punished to come here. I didn't expect such a thing to happen, it's really..." Xiao Hua shook his hands, feeling extremely helpless. The cause was his new house, and it was also his new house that had an accident. However, he did not know what had happened. Now he could not live in this courtyard anymore. Not to mention that Xiao Jie was not in the courtyard now. The courtyard was almost burnt, and he could not live in it even if he wanted to. Moreover, this matter was over now, and the minister's mansion would definitely be angry. Xiao Hua could not be considered a person now. "So you want to choose a new house?" When Shichi looked at Xiao Hua, who looked sad. "It seems that this is the only way." Xiao Hua nodded. "Let Minister Zhao's mansion choose. As long as there is no one living in it, choose a suitable one, and it can appease their anger." When Shichi comforted Xiao Hua, "Now this is the only way." Xiao Hua nodded. While they were talking in a low voice, many people went to look for Xiao Jie, but they still did not see her. Even if they pulled up the beam in the middle, they still could not see anything. Xiao Jie seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Duke Xing was very anxious. He asked people to turn over the whole collapsed roof, but there was still nothing. Xiao Jie was also not there. Many people shouted, "Second miss! Second miss!" When the roof was turned over, it meant that Xiao Jie was still alive. However, there were still some places that had not been turned over, so they really did not know how she was. Xiao Jie woke up in this kind of shouting. She covered her head and stood up. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Hearing the shout of "second miss" coming from not far away, Xiao Jie responded subconsciously. She closed her eyes and then opened them again. She saw Xiao Jing's excited face. She had never received such attention from her father. "Second miss, it's really you. Why are you here?" an old maid said excitedly. Everyone thought that Xiaojie could not escape death this time. Unexpectedly, she was not only not dead, but also alive. Except for some burn marks on her dress, other parts of her body were clean. Xiaojie was now standing in the pavilion behind a big tree outside the yard that had been burned before. The tree was very big and seemed to shelter her from the wind and rain, covering half of the pavilion. When the yard was on fire just now, although everyone rushed over to put out the fire, no one noticed the pavilion over there. Although it was right in front of them, they just could not see it. They just focused on putting out the fire. So, second miss was not in the room, but fell asleep here? Miss. A servant girl suddenly rushed in from outside the crowd and hugged Xiaojie. Everyone looked and found that it was Xiaojie's servant girl named Liuxiang. The servant girl was also unscathed, but there was a trace of black at the corner of her dress, which seemed to be related to the fire. Father? Elder brother? Xiaojie was still a little dizzy. For a moment, she did not understand why these two people appeared in front of her. She closed her eyes again and wondered if she was dreaming. "Why are you here?" Xiao Jing looked Xiaojie up and down and asked coldly. "They just came out for a walk." Xiaojie was a little disjointed. She smiled awkwardly and tried to remember what had happened before. "Come out for a walk? Why didn't I see you just now?" Xiao Jing said coldly. "I didn't see you just now. Maybe I left just now." Xiaojie laughed dryly again, and her smile became more and more forced. At this time, she finally remembered how she got out of the room. Originally, when the room was on fire, she found an excuse to leave and then came back later. Now that the room had been burned down, she should show her innocence at this time. "Why did you leave?" Xiao Jing said coldly. Fifth sister? Xiaojie turned around as if she was looking for Xiao Wanru. "What happened to your fifth sister?" Xiao Jing asked. "Fifth sister's servant girl." Just now, fifth sister's servant girl happened to come over and said that what happened today was not fifth sister's idea, so I was going to see fifth sister. But on the way, I thought it was not good to disturb fifth sister at this time. "It's so late." Xiaojie had come to her senses and answered in a very orderly manner. "Why did Wanru's servant girl come here? This place is very far from her place." Xiao Jing didn't quite believe it. "Father, it's true. It's true. Fifth sister's servant girl. I've seen her before. Although I couldn't remember at first, I remembered when she told me later." Xiaojie said anxiously with a look of fear. Xiao Jing reached out to pull Liuxiang over and said, "Father, if you don't believe me, you can ask Liuxiang." Liuxiang also saw that servant girl. Liuxiang was pulled painfully by Xiaojie. Xiaojie pulled hard and pulled a piece of her flesh. Now seeing Xiao Jing's eyes turn to her, she nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, I saw her with my miss." Liuxiang's hand was pulled so painfully, which represented Mrs. Hint. How could Liuxiang not understand? But in fact, Liuxiang was also very confused. She had just woken up. When she woke up, there was no one around her. She was thrown in the corner. Hearing the sound outside the wall, she hurriedly turned around and saw Xiaojie in the crowd. She immediately had a backbone and rushed over. But now she was also dizzy. She didn't know what had happened, but she knew that it couldn't be said casually. She immediately followed Xiaojie's words and lowered her eyes subconsciously to hide the panic at the bottom of her eyes. In fact, she really didn't know what her miss meant when she mentioned fifth Mrs. Servant Girl. She didn't see fifth Mrs. Servant Girl just now. After leaving the room, she felt a pain in her head and then fainted. "Go and invite fifth miss here." Xiao Jing ordered an old maid with a gloomy face. The old maid nodded and hurriedly ran out, but it didn't take long for her to come back in a hurry. There was no one behind her. "Duke, when the fire started just now, fifth miss was afraid and went to old madam's courtyard. Now she is in old madam's courtyard. What do you think of this?" "Let's go to old madam's courtyard." Xiao Jing found that the fire had been completely put out and asked someone to send others away. Since fifth miss was fine and the fire was also put out, He could deal with other things tomorrow. He took Xiao Jie and Xiao Hua into old Madame's courtyard. When Shichi followed beside Xiao Hua, his eyes fell on Xiao Jie's dress, and the corners of his mouth curled up with a thoughtful smile. Then his eyes fell on Xiao Jie's hair, which was messy and stained with some dust. When they came to old Madame's Chuntang courtyard, Xiao Wanru sat in front of old Madame calmly. Seeing them come in, she hurriedly stood up, bowed to Xiao Jing, who was walking in front, and then bowed to Xiao Hua. Finally, she raised her beautiful eyes and was stunned to meet a pair of clear eyes. She was slightly stunned, but immediately bowed again. Then she stood aside obediently and waited for old Madame's order. Old Madame didn't look very good. She didn't look directly at Xiao Jing, who was walking in front. Instead, she looked at Xiao Jie, who was half hidden behind the crowd. She just glanced at Xiao Jie, and then turned away, as if she didn't see Xiao Jie, just now. Xiao Wanru had been paying attention to old Madame's expression. She saw that old Madame just glanced at Xiao Jie, without worry, joy, or other changes in her eyes. Obviously, Xiao Wanru was not surprised to see Xiao Jie here. Xiao Wanru couldn't help sneering in her heart. As expected, this was planned by old Madame. Chapter 8:33. Fifth sister, what did you want to tell me by sending a servant girl here just now? Xiao Jie leaned close to Xiao Wanru. Although her voice was very soft, no one in the room spoke at this moment. Her words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jie in astonishment and said, "Second sister, when did I send someone here?" "Didn't you send someone here?" Xiao Jie's face became very ugly and she said anxiously, "Why didn't anyone come here? That servant girl is obviously the servant girl in your courtyard." "The servant girl in my courtyard?" Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows and repeated, "Yes, the servant girl in your courtyard. I can't tell her name, but I will definitely recognize her when I see her," Xiao Jie said anxiously and hurriedly. Xiao Wanru pursed her lips and showed a smile on her face after a long while. However, the smile was a little cold. Seeing that Xiao Jie said so firmly and was about to go to her courtyard to recognize the servant girl, needless to say, there was indeed such a person in her courtyard who had contacted her. "Second sister, are you sure?" Xiao Wanru asked. "Of course." "Fifth sister, after you sent someone to ask the servant girl to arouse me, the courtyard where I lived before was on fire. Fifth sister, do you really not know it?" Seeing Xiao Wanru's expression, Xiao Jie's flustered heart calmed down a little. It seemed that this matter could still be remedied. "Second miss, fifth miss, what are you talking about?" Old Madame, who was sitting in the upper seat, coughed heavily and said, "Except for the two of them, everyone else in the room had sat down as guests and hosts." When Shichi glanced at Xiao Wanru, who was a little confused, and inexplicably felt that Xiao Wanru, who was standing in the room at this time, looked a little aggrieved and sad. His heart suddenly beat a few times and his handsome eyebrows frowned. He didn't like this feeling very much. There was a kind of uncontrollable anger towards other people in the room, which was controlled by her. He took a deep breath and suppressed the irritation in his heart. When he looked up again, his eyes were clear. As an official of the Ministry of Justice, he should listen to everyone's confession calmly. Moreover, this was the matter of Duke Xing's mansion. Before the truth was found out, it was inappropriate for him to say anything. What he should do was to maintain a detached attitude. "Grandma, I have been copying books in my eldest brother's bridal chamber, but later fifth younger sister sent a servant girl to tell me what happened today. I thought these things couldn't be spread clearly through a servant girl, so I left to find fifth younger sister, but I didn't expect that the room would be on fire after I left for a while." Xiao Jie looked at old Madame in panic and fear. Xiao Wanru suddenly raised her eyes and looked at her coldly. Her words were really good. She had already blamed her for the fire. His words implied that he had sent someone to lure Xiao Jie out, and then let them kill her. "Don't talk nonsense. Your fifth sister must have something to tell you." Old Madame's face darkened. She glanced at Wen Shichi, who was sitting beside her, and reprimanded him. Xiao Jie's eyes turned red. She lowered her head aggrievedly, but did not dare to say anything. She just held her handkerchief, looking as if she wanted to say something but did not dare to. How's the fever? Are you hurt? Old Madam scolded Xiao Jie, and turned to ask Xiao Jing. No one was hurt, but this courtyard can't be used anymore. Xiao Jing frowned and said with a headache, other things are fine, but the furniture sent by the minister's mansion has been burned. It's not easy to explain to the minister's mansion. All of them have been burned? Old Madam straightened up and felt that it was not easy to deal with this matter. Almost all of them have been burned. Even if they were taken out, half of them have been burned and can't be used anymore. Xiao Jing said helplessly, I'm afraid. Before he finished his words, everyone in the room understood that it was indeed Duke Xing's mansion's mistake. It was inevitable that the minister's mansion would be angry. Now they had to find a way to appease the anger of the minister's mansion. What conditions do they want? Agree to them. Old Madam said tiredly. It was indeed difficult for an elderly person to bear being suddenly woken up in the middle of the night, especially on such a cold night. Although Old Madam's room was very warm, the warmth was diluted by so many people coming in. Nanny, you brought another heater over and handed it to Madam Dowager. Madam Dowager hugged it tightly and rolled her eyes slightly. She seemed to be a little energetic, but no matter how one looked at it, she was trying her best to be energetic. We can only agree to them in this way. No matter what conditions they put forward, it's always our Duke Xing's mansion's fault. Xiao Jing also nodded and glanced at the people present. He put his hands on the armrest of the chair and stood up to leave. Since this matter had to be decided by the minister's mansion and Old Madam was not in good spirits at this time, he could only wait until tomorrow. When he put his hands on the armrest of the chair, he heard Xiao Wanru ask Xiao Jie in a low voice, Second sister, did you really see the servant girl I sent? Is she really a servant girl in my courtyard? But I didn't send a servant girl here. Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes innocently and looked at Xiao Jie. Just now, unconsciously, she had already leaned against Xiao Jie. The two of them stood together. Her voice was not loud, but it was just the right time. Xiao Jing stopped talking and was about to say goodbye to Old Madam when Xiao Wanru's words came in at this time. When Shichi picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and slowly put it down. He knew that he couldn't just let it go like this. Second sister, are you trying to shirk the responsibility? Seeing that Xiao Jie didn't react, Xiao Wanru continued to ask. Her face was facing Xiao Jie, so she didn't notice that everyone in the room had turned their eyes to them. She didn't see it, but Xiao Jie saw it. Not only did she see it, but she also saw Old Madam's cold eyes. She couldn't help shivering with fear and hurriedly said, Fifth sister, don't talk nonsense. It's really a servant girl in your courtyard. If you don't believe it, call the servant girl in your courtyard over. I can definitely pick her out. After saying that, she tried to show that she was in the right. She could really pick out the servant girl. Old Madam had told her who it was before, and she had seen her. Second sister, are you really going to point out the servant girl? Xiao Wanru asked with a faint smile. Of course, I can definitely pick her out. I just don't understand why you asked the servant girl to come to me at this time. You just said that I was trying to shirk the responsibility. I think you did something wrong. Sensing her confidence, Xiao Jie kept a straight face and straightened her back. There was indeed such a person. She was really not afraid that Xiao Wanru would continue to inquire about it. Even if she went to find the servant girl, she could find her. Since Xiao Jie was confident, she became arrogant again. What nonsense are you talking about? Get down. Old Madam, who was sitting on the top, looked a little defeated and reprimanded Xiao Jie with a gloomy face. It seemed that she didn't want to make a big deal out of it and wanted to keep the peace. Just like before, Old Madam said this when Xiao Jie was about to point out the servant girl. It sounded as if she was wholeheartedly protecting Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. Old Madam was partial to everyone, but not to her. In fact, she was using a vague attitude to shift the blame to her. It didn't mean that it was not the case. Old Madam's protection really made people suspect that Xiao Wanru had done something. Although it was Xiao Caihuan who quarreled with Xiao Jie during the day, Xiao Wanru went there with Xiao Caihuan at that time. Xiao Wanru quarreled with Xiao Caihuan and harbored hatred in her heart. After being reprimanded by old madam, it was possible that she was unwilling to do something. Grandma Xiaojie was obviously not in the wrong, but now she was reprimanded by old madam. For a moment, she felt so aggrieved that she was about to cry again. According to old madam, she really shouldn't mention it at this time. But when she remembered that Xiao Wanru said that she wanted to shirk her responsibility, Xiaojie felt unwilling to let Xiao Wanru go like this. Xiaojie had finally grasped Xiao Wanru's weakness. Xiao Yinru felt reluctant to let it go, but she did not dare to disobey old madam's order. Grandmother, since two. Elder sister, if you see my people, can you ask second sister to identify them? When the fire broke out just now, the people in my courtyard were also alarmed. They should be up at this time. Xiao Wanru turned to old madam unhurriedly and continued the topic of old madam. Old madam looked at Xiao Wanru with anger and disappointment in her eyes. Wanru, let's talk about your matter tomorrow. Your grandma was frightened tonight and couldn't bear it. Xiao Jing coughed in a low voice to relieve the embarrassment. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, Second uncle, I think it's better to make it clear today. It happens that Lord Wen is also here. Let Lord Wen listen in. I'm afraid that after tonight, the so-called servant girl in my courtyard may have an accident. At that time, there will be no evidence, and I can't explain it clearly. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said. Xiao Jing looked a little embarrassed when he was refused by a junior. Then Xiao Wanru's words made him even more displeased and his face darkened. The servant girl in your courtyard is fine. How could something happen to her? Don't talk nonsense. Go back and have a rest. After saying that, he was about to stand up and didn't want to talk with Xiao Wanru anymore. It was already late tonight, and everyone was tired now. Since the fire had been put out, they could deal with other things tomorrow. When Shichi's hand gently touched the delicate pattern on the teacup, he lowered his head slightly and showed a faint smile at the corners of his mouth. He waited quietly for Xiao Wanru to continue. Second uncle, please wait a moment. I suspect that someone wants to frame me by using the servant girl in my courtyard. Please uphold justice. Xiao Wanru blinked her watery eyes and said, Second sister, can you point out the servant girl tonight and let her tell the truth? Fifth miss, it's too late now. Let's do it tomorrow. Old madam finally opened her mouth and said coldly. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes to look at old madam and said softly, Grandma, let's stop what happened today. It should be over soon. How about you pick out the servant girl and protect her in my yard to protect her? How dare you? Old madam scolded. What kind of rule was it to let her, a dignified old madam of Duke's mansion, protect a servant girl? Grandma, please wait for a while. I just want to ask you to be a witness to prove my innocence. Xiao Wanru seemed to hear old madam's scolding and still said. Then she raised her eyes to look at Xiaojie and said provocatively, Second sister, you dare to do it. Chapter 8:34. Xiaojie was not willing to let Xiao Wanru off. After being provoked by Xiao Wanru and feeling very confident, she was really not afraid of Xiao Wanru's request for confirmation. She immediately raised her head and said, Why wouldn't I dare? I'll look for her. What will you say after I find her? If I find her, I'll take it that you don't want to hurt me. Xiao Wanru slightly curved the corners of her mouth, which looked like a smile but was not a smile. If I find her, I'll take it that I don't want to hurt you? Fifth sister, you really take advantage of me by saying that. Xiaojie said with a sneer. She had originally followed old madam's order and did not argue with Xiao Wanru on this matter. However, the more Xiao Wanru said, the more she could not bear it. Xiaojie did not intend to give in to Xiao Wanru anymore. What do you mean, second sister? Xiao Wanru asked. I mean that if I can't find her, it will be my fault, and I will kowtow to you to apologize in front of you. If I find her, it will be my fault, and you have to kowtow to me to apologize in front of Grandma. Xiaojie said with a sneer. She was bound to win this matter. Old madam sat on it with a gloomy face, but she did not stop Xiaojie, which made Xiaojie more confident. She looked at Xiao Wanru with an increasingly complacent look. Why would she let Xiao Wanru go so easily when she was sure that she would win? Of course, she could not really do anything to Xiao Wanru. She just proved that Xiao Wanru had sent someone here, and she did not say that she had seen Xiao Wanru send someone to set the fire. Others might not know how the fire started, but Xiao Jie knew it clearly. Second sister, your condition sounds fair, but in fact, it is not fair. Second sister, can your apology be the same as mine? Xiao Wanru said with a faint smile. The identity of a daughter of lineal descent made the daughter of a concubine breathless. In aristocratic families, lineal descent and concubine descent had always been distinguished. Xiao Jie, the daughter of lineal descent, was lower than Xiao Wanru's. If the daughter of lineal descent did something wrong, she must apologize to the daughter of lineal descent. However, if the daughter of lineal descent did something wrong, she did not necessarily have to apologize to the daughter of lineal descent, and she even had to kowtow to apologize in front of everyone. From this point of view, what Xiao Jie said was indeed unfair. Xiao Jie's face turned red. She was not ashamed, but angry and annoyed. As a daughter of non-lineal descent, she was inferior to others in the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Now Xiao Wanru mentioned it again in front of so many people. Xiao Jie felt deeply ashamed and her blood rushed to her head. She glared at Xiao Wanru with hatred, as if Xiao Wanru had done something unpardonable. Fifth sister, what do you mean? Gritting her teeth, Xiao Jie finally couldn't suppress the anger in her heart. Xiao Wanru glanced at Xiao Jie with a very calm attitude, which formed a sharp contrast with Xiao Jie's exasperation and hatred. I don't mean anything else. I just mean that second sister's method is unfair. If I'm wrong, I will apologize to second sister, but I don't need to kowtow to ask for forgiveness. As for second sister, if you're wrong, I don't need you to kowtow to me. Although Xiao Jie was a daughter of non-lineal descent, she was the elder sister. If she was wrong, it would be fine if she apologized to her, but if she kowtowed to her, others would gossip about her. Moreover, Xiao Wanru's original intention was not to suppress Xiao Jie. Not only would she not suppress Xiao Jie, but she would also give her the opportunity so that she could climb up. Secondary wife? If her second uncle had a secondary wife, many things could be dealt with separately. Xiao Jie's concubine, Xiao Wanru, thought highly of her. Xiao Jing actually had several concubines, but the one who really gave birth to the child was Xiao Jie's biological mother, Concubine Lu. Concubine Lu was originally Madame of Jiang's servant girl. Later, it was said that Madame of Jiang took the initiative to open the door for her and became one of Xiao Jing's concubines. In the past, she also kept a low profile in the mansion. She was very respectful to Madame of Jiang and usually got along well with other concubines. Although she didn't look impressive, at least she could give birth to the child safely, who was Xiao Jing's only daughter of non-lineal descent, Xiao Jie. Such a low-key person lived a good life in Duke Xing's mansion. The fact that she could give birth to a child in the hands of Madame of Jiang and Xiao Jing showed that Concubine Lu was very resourceful. Recently, Concubine Lu had helped third Madame manage the household affairs. Xiao Wanru had inquired about it and found that Concubine Lu managed the household affairs in an orderly manner. It was said that this was also because she had served Madame of Jiang before and had seen how Madame of Jiang handled the household affairs. She had been serving Madame of Jiang and later became a concubine who could give birth to a child. Although the child she gave birth to was a daughter, it showed that this Concubine Lu was not simple. She had the opportunity and the person, and the only thing she lacked was ambition. Judging from Concubine Lu's behavior in the past, she was definitely not the kind of person who acted recklessly. But if she was not reckless, there would be reckless people. Xiao Jie was ambitious, but it was not sure whether her ambition could persuade Concubine Lu now. Of course, she would not let go of such a good opportunity to belittle Xiao Jie. Only by provoking Xiao Jie, could it be possible to provoke Concubine Lu behind her. After hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Xiao Jie secretly gritted her teeth and had to agree. Gritting his teeth, he had no choice but to agree. If she didn't want to kowtow, then so be it. As long as this lass apologized to him and apologized, at least in this residence, she would have to avoid him when she saw him, and he could use this as leverage against her. Okay, that's it. Xiao Jie nodded hard, turned to old madam, and said, "Grandma, since fifth sister doesn't believe what I said, I will go to fifth sister's yard to identify her. At that time, I can also prove my innocence." If she proved her innocence, Xiao Wanru would not be innocent. With her long eyelashes fluttering twice, Xiao Wanru raised her head and looked at old madam, who had a gloomy face. Since she didn't say a word and didn't stop her, it meant that she allowed it. Her eyes were as deep as a pool of cold, without any warmth. "Fifth miss, do you really want second miss to identify her?" Old madam finally spoke and glanced at Xiao Wanru with a gloomy face. "Grandma, let second sister's people look for her. I really didn't ask anyone to come over and talk to second sister." Xiao Wanru looked at old madam extremely calmly and said. Then her long eyelashes fell, carrying a bit of tiredness and helplessness. The uneven shadows under the light made her delicate face pale as snow, inexplicably making people feel weak and delicate. Standing in a corner, it was as if she couldn't mingle with the people around her. Even though there were many people standing around her, she was lonely. When Shichi's eyes fell on the teacup in front of him, it seemed that he was focused on the patterns on the teacup, but only he knew that after glancing at the delicate girl just now, he felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if there was something tangled in it, which made him very sad and uncomfortable. He tried his best to ignore this feeling and stared at the teacup in front of him, but what he saw was still the delicate pink face hanging down. She was angry and smiling, as if she was in a painting or deeply engraved in his memory. Everything on the teacup was still her. No matter how he looked at it, it was still her. However, she looked sad most of the time. Even though she was smiling, she gave people a feeling of loneliness and sadness, as if she had no one to rely on. It was originally a woman's sorrow that she wanted to rely on but had no one to rely on. Everything around her was very lively and happy, but it was others who were lively. While she was alone, there was a place in his heart that was faintly collapsing. He couldn't control the feeling that a glance had lasted for 1,000 years or a glance of 1,000 years. The glance just now seemed to have traveled through 1,000 years, which made all his emotions in the past slowly gather together, including the indifference at the beginning, the suspicion later, and the disgust at the end. All kinds of emotions were deeply entangled. He had always been an intelligent person. He had never thought of it before because he felt that it was absolutely impossible, and he had never thought in this direction. Now, all of his thoughts were filled with all sorts of emotions because of that fleeting glance just now. Many of his senses were becoming clearer and clearer, and he understood more and more. His heart, which had always been calm, lost its usual calm rhythm and beat a little out of control. He reached out and slowly held the teacup with deep eyes. He slowly took a sip, raised his head, listened quietly to the movement in the room, and didn't look at Xiao Wanru again. In this case, go and investigate it. Old madam became a little impatient, waved her hand and said, "Yes, Grandma, I'll go right away." Xiao Jie nodded and turned to leave, but was stopped by Xiao Wanru. "Second sister, you don't have to go. It's so late and it's not appropriate for you to go there like this." Xiao Jie stopped and looked at Xiao Wanru with a sarcastic smile. "Fifth sister, are you afraid? It's okay. At most, I will ask you to apologize later. I can't ask you to kowtow." She thought that Xiao Wanru stopped her because she had a guilty conscience. Xiao Wanru shook her head with a smile and said, "Second sister, how can you think that I'm afraid? How can I be afraid? It's not me who called her, and it's not her. I'm just worried that you will be tired after running around in the middle of the night. It's better to ask a servant girl to recognize her." Xiao Jie didn't keep up with Xiao Wanru's thoughts. After being stunned for a moment, she asked subconsciously, "Who will go to find the servant girl?" Xiao Wanru glanced at Xiao Jie and said with a smile, "Second sister, it's very good for Liuxiang. She can go to find the servant girl, so you don't have to run around. Liuxiang was with you before, so she should have seen the servant girl." Xiao Jie opened her mouth, and her complacent look immediately became flustered. Originally, she was going to tell Liuxiang about it, but then it happened so suddenly that she and Liuxiang both fainted. When they woke up, they were seen by someone. Liu Xiang and Liu Xiang didn't have any good words, so Liu Xiang didn't know which maid it was. Xiao Jie, or had a bad feeling in her heart. She fainted before she could say anything to Liu Xiang. However, an idea flashed across her mind and she hurriedly said, "When the servant girl in your courtyard came over, Liu Xiang hadn't come back yet. Liu Xiang happened to not see it. Second sister, when you left, did you go out alone and didn't wait for Liu Xiang to come back?" Xiao Wanru continued to ask. Seeing that Xiao Jie was forced to retreat by Xiao Wanru and even had a cold sweat on her face, old madam, who was sitting above, put down the teacup in her hand heavily. When she was about to speak, she was interrupted by another clear voice. "Second Miss Xiao, when you were in the fire, you said that your servant girl also saw it, and that servant girl testified for you. Now do you want to retract your testimony?" Chapter 8:35. Seeing old madam's impatience, Xiao Wanru knew that old madam was going to intervene, so she waited quietly to step in. Unexpectedly, when Shichi intervened at this time. She had thought that when Shichi would say a few words after the truth came to light at the end. She rolled her watery eyes in surprise, which were beautiful, gentle, but cold and alert. When Shichi lowered his eyes slightly, but then raised them again with a friendly and gentle smile. Compared with Chu Luqian, who pretended to be harmless and gentle, when Shichi's gentleness was revealed from the bottom of his heart, which could make people feel good about him. "Second Miss, many people heard what you said at the fireside just now, including Duke Xing and the first young master. How do you explain it now?" When Shichi turned his eyes to Xiao Jie, he was still smiling at Xiao Jie, but his words were very sharp, as if he was going to drag Xiao Jie to the court for interrogation. The words he used were also the words used in the court. Xiao Jie had never seen such a scene. Hearing it, she panicked. At this time, she remembered that in order to make her words more credible, she had asked Liu Xiang to testify. At this time, it was a little unreasonable to say that Liu Xiang was not there. She looked at old madam with her mouth agape, hoping that old madam could give her a hint. Old madam was so angry that she scolded Xiao Jie in her heart. She had known that Xiao Jie was useless, but she didn't expect her to be so stupid. It seemed that Xiao Jie could not justify herself. Old madam coughed in a low voice and scolded her, "Why did you talk nonsense just now?" She regarded Xiao Jie's words at the fireside as nonsense and couldn't be trusted. At the same time, it showed that what she said now was true. "Yes, I saw so many of you surrounding me at that time. I was afraid, so I said so. It's not true." Reminded by old madam, Xiao Jie immediately came to her senses and hurriedly waved her hand. At that time, Xiao Jie didn't dare to say that she seemed to have been knocked out. A miss from an aristocratic family was very particular about her reputation. If she was knocked out and left alone in a corner, her reputation would be ruined. Moreover, there were so many people at that time. She couldn't tell anyone about it. "Second Miss, do you mean that you were afraid, so you asked the servant girl to testify at that time?" When Shichi asked with a smile. "Yes, I was afraid at that time, so I said that in a panic." Xiao Jie insisted. "Well, even if you told me about the servant girl because you were afraid, can you tell me the scene when you left the room at that time? Was there a fire at that time?" When Shichi continued to ask, Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the corner of Xiao Jie's skirt. There was a burn mark there, but it was not only on her body, but also on Xiao Jing and Xiao Hua. They just came from the fire site, so it was not a big deal to have 1 or 2 burn marks on their bodies. She raised the corners of her mouth slightly and already knew what when Shichi was going to say. Others might be accidentally splashed by the fire, but when Xiao Jie appeared in the fire site, the fire should be about to go out or had already gone out. In fact, it was hard to tell the burn marks on her body. When I left, of course there was no fire. I originally wanted to ask fifth sister about it, but when I was about to arrive, I remembered that fifth sister might have fallen asleep, so I turned back. Xiao Jie could only say this now, and she secretly panicked. When she was young, she was afraid of Shichi, so she certainly didn't dare to play with him. She thought that the little child of Deputy Prime Minister Wen's mansion was smarter than others. Every time she wanted to hide something, she couldn't. Second miss, since you left before the fire started and came here after the fire went out, how did you get the burn mark on your body? When Shichi's eyes fell on Xiao Zhe's dress, where there was a burn mark, old madam sat on the chair and her face changed dramatically. She glared at the burn mark on Xiao Zhe's body. Of course, she also saw the burn mark on Xiao Zhe's body. However, when she saw the burn mark on her second son and eldest grandson, she didn't care about it and thought that Xiao Zhe's clothes were dipped in sparks just now. Unexpectedly, when Xiao Zhe came back, the fire had gone out. The fire had gone out, but her dress was burned. Where did the fire come from? Old madam was so angry that she almost burst out burning sparks. She just wanted to crack open Xiao Zhe's head and see how could there be such a stupid person. Xiao Zhe not only sweated on her forehead, but also all over her body. Her eyes fluttered and she suddenly said in a hurry, I went there with fifth sister servant girl, but when I came back, I carried the lantern alone. I fell on the way and the lantern overturned. The fire inside burned my dress. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and slapped it out. Xiao Zhe's words became smoother and smoother. In the end, she even felt that it was flawless. Anyway, she said that she fell and fell. How did you fall, second miss? When Shichi still didn't let her go. He stared at her closely and asked. His eyes showed Xiao Zhe's deep and serious panic. Xiao Zhe opened her mouth. There seemed to be a flash of white light in her mind. Some things in her memory suddenly came to her mind. She panicked so much that her face immediately turned pale. Even her lips trembled a few times, but she couldn't make a sound. Seeing Xiao Zhe's sudden reaction, Xiao Wanru looked at her in surprise and then at Wen Shichi. The smile on Wen Shichi's face had faded, and there was a sense of seriousness and fierceness on his face. He pointed at Xiao Zhe like an unsheathed sword. However, Xiao Zhe's reaction was also very strange. Even though Wen Shichi seemed a little nervous, her face would not change so drastically. Xiao Zhe frowned slightly and thought, is there any reason that I don't know? Second miss, tell me how you fell. After that, you can ask Lord Wen to record it. It's cold, and Lord Wen has been waiting for a long time. Old madam said impatiently. It was obvious that she wanted to drive her guest away. If it weren't for Wen Shichi, it would have been much smoother at this time. Old madam felt inexplicably annoyed. Without great elder princess, Wen Shichi came to make trouble. She just wanted Xiao Zhe to make it clear so that Wen Shichi could go back. I just knelt down and fell so my skirt was burned. Being reprimanded by old madam, Xiao Zhe woke up from her memory and hurriedly explained in a panic. If the skirt was burned, the skirt should reach the fire. Second miss, are you sure that you fell like this and not in other ways? Or I'll say something wrong again in a moment of panic. Wen Shichi said with a smile on his face, looking a little bit calm. I fell like this. I'm very sure, Xiao Zhe said in a hurry. You can be sure that's the best. Wen Shichi turned his head unhurriedly to look at old madam and reported, Old madam, I've asked all the questions. Now I have a conclusion that second Miss Xiao lied. His words shocked everyone in the room and they all looked at Xiao Zhe in surprise. I didn't lie. I really fell like this. Xiao Zhe had no confidence. Being looked at by others, she immediately shook her head in a panic. Yuan Qing, what did you find? Xiao Hua looked at Wen Shichi and asked. Old madam looked at Wen Shichi coldly and was full of displeasure. Wen Shichi ignored old madam's gaze and just reached out to point at Xiao Zhe's head. Old madam, first young master. Second Miss Xiao said that she just knelt down and fell to the ground and only her skirt was burned, but her hair was messy and covered with dust. She didn't kneel down and fall like this. Just now I asked her again and again if she could be sure, and she repeatedly said that it was like this. In fact, she lied. Wen Shichi was relatively tall, so he could clearly see Xiao Zhe's head from where he stood. Xiao Jing and Xiao Hua were also tall, so they could also see Xiao Zhe's head. However, no one noticed it on the way here. At this time, when they looked carefully, they found that there was some dust in the messy hair and even a small stone hanging on her head. It was obvious that she hit her head on the ground. Second Miss Xiao, is there any reason why you can't say it? When Shichi said and pressed. At this time, Xiaojie was really flustered. She hurriedly wanted to hold her head with both hands, but immediately knew that it was futile. She could only turn to old madam and say, "Grandma, Grandma." Another clear voice interrupted her. Xiao Wenru took a step forward to old madam, bowed sideways to her respectfully, and then raised her body with her watery eyes falling on old madam and said, "Grandma, please do me justice." Xiao Jie's words were not convincing enough, so her previous words were more likely to be a series of lies. Thinking of the fact that she might have gotten angry when she left, it was most likely that Xiao Jie was the one who got angry. Although Xiao Wenru didn't blame Xiao Jie, the meaning in her words was very obvious. Moreover, when Shichi was here now. Although she didn't know why when Shichi suddenly helped her, it was just right for her, so she immediately seized the opportunity. Old madam was so angry that she almost wanted to eat Xiao Jie. Along the way, none of Xiao Jie's words were reliable. What she said was flustered one after another. Now Xiao Jie was blamed for this. It was useless for Xiao Jie to do this. She wanted Xiao Wenru to take the blame, not to make Xiao Wenru bear the blame. As long as she took the blame, the next thing would be much easier. She had thought that it was just a simple thing. Even if Xiao Jie was not smart, she could do it well. She didn't expect that she would make so many mistakes, and the situation in front of her was even harder to deal with. When Shichi's words hit Xiao Jie's flaws. Even if old madam wanted to defend Xiao Jie, she could not do so. "Jie, is this really related to you?" Xiao Jing asked coldly. "Father, it's not me. It's none of my business. I really want to find fifth sister. I really..." Xiao Jie burst into tears. She didn't know what to say. Chapter 8:36. Second Miss, you said you broke the lantern. Where is the lantern now? Could it be that someone happened to pass by and take your broken lantern away? What's more, you don't know the servant who carried the broken lantern away, do you? When Shichi seemed not to see Xiao Jie's pitiful look of crying in panic and said such words. As soon as he said this, it was almost a foregone conclusion. Even if Xiao Jie lied 1,000 times, it was impossible for her to produce real evidence to prove it. What the Ministry of Justice needed the most was proof and evidence, not a witness like her who always said she was wrong. Xiao Jie could only cry and try to get away with it. When Shichi took a step back and cupped his hands to Xiao Jing and Xiao Hu, Duke Xing, first young master, it is obviously related to Second Mississippi. I have something to do, so I have to leave now. If you need me tomorrow, just send someone to pass a message to me. He didn't call himself as he used to. He used I to represent his current identity as an official of the Ministry of Justice. What he said later was to guarantee that he could testify for this matter. Xiao Wenru didn't know whether it was good for Xiao Jing and others, but she knew that it was good for her. When Shichi's words were equivalent to asking for a guarantee from an official of the Ministry of Justice, which was more useful than any witness. Old madam asked Xiao Jie to plot against her in order to get a handle on her so that she could hold her hostage in the following matters. Up to now, Xiao Wenru had basically understood old madam's meaning. A sneer slowly appeared in her eyes. Although when Shichi's behavior was a little strange, it would only benefit her. She would wait and see what old madam would say to her next. She couldn't use her backup plan for the time being. After when Shichi finished speaking, he cupped his hands to old madam on the high seat, turned around and strode away. Seeing him leave in a cool manner, old madam felt suffocated. At this time, no one would believe it if she said it had nothing to do with Xiao Jie. "Mother, it's getting late. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Xiao Jing looked around and said. This was a matter of the inner court. He and Xiao Hua could leave as long as the mansion didn't intend to disclose it. It could be regarded as a matter of the inner court. Xiao Wenru sneered. Things had come to this point, but he still wanted to avoid it. She took a step forward and bowed deeply to Xiao Jing. She looked up and said, "Second uncle, second sister is involved in the fire. Don't you want to know why she did this?" Her words were extremely sharp, almost pointing out that Xiao Jie was the arsonist. I didn't set the fire. I really didn't set the fire. I really left with a maid. Xiao Jie was so anxious that she argued despite her tears. Second sister, are you trying to say that I sent someone to get you? Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jie and asked with a cold look. Then she said before Xiao Jie could answer, in this case, second sister, how about going to the Hall of the Ministry of Justice tomorrow? Let's see if the people from the Ministry of Justice believe second sister or me. I'll go. I'll go. Xiao Jie said fiercely. That's a deal. Please point out the culprit, second sister, Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Old Madam slapped the table heavily and said sternly, both of you are from respectable families. How can you say that we'll go to the Hall of the Ministry of Justice? Second brother, you and Hua can leave now. I'll deal with it. Old Madam waved to Xiao Jing and said. Xiao Jing nodded and took a few steps. He looked back at Xiao Wanru. He couldn't see through his niece. He couldn't tell whether she was really lucky or something else at the moment. Xiao Wanru stood there with her head lowered and looked a little angry. No one would be happy to be framed. Her reaction at the moment should be the most direct one. She didn't bear it and directly took action. It was much simpler than a niece who knew how to bear it. Even when Xiao Wanru stopped him just now, he didn't get angry. If he was really scheming, he should bear it at this time and take action when and Great Elder Princess came tomorrow. But she couldn't bear it, so she shouldn't be so scheming. It seemed that it was Wen Shiqi who messed up today's matter. Xiao Jing had always known Wen Shiqi, who had always been indifferent to human relationships. His son had been friends with him for a long time, but they just did each other a favor. He didn't expect that Wen Shiqi would suddenly take action. What did he mean? Could it be that there was a prince behind Wen Shiqi? Thinking of this, Xiao Jing immediately lost his composure and turned his attention from Xiao Wanru to Wen Shiqi. He turned around and strode out of the Chuntang courtyard. He went straight back to the study and asked someone to investigate Wen Shiqi. Wen Shiqi didn't have much to do with what happened today, but he reached out to take responsibility for it. It was so strange. Xiao Jing left with Xiao Hu. After they left, the room became dull again. Old Madam, who was sitting in the chair, looked at Xiao Jie coldly. She only stared at Xiao Jie and shivered, not even daring to cry. The room was terribly quiet, and Xiao Jie was increasingly panicked and rapid breathing could almost be heard. Grandma. Xiao Jie couldn't help crying. Kneel down before your fifth sister and make tea to apologize. Old Madam's words almost came out from the gaps between her teeth, which made Xiao Jie tremble a few times. She turned to look at Xiao Wanru and cried sadly, fifth sister. She didn't want to kneel down. There were other servants here. If she, the elder sister, knelt down, she would be ashamed in the future. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jie extremely coldly and calmly. There was a depth and coldness in her eyes that Xiao Jie couldn't understand. Xiao Jie felt very regretful at this time. She had known that Xiao Wanru was not easy to deal with, but she had listened to Old Madam's words. Now, not only did she not get any benefits, but she was even pushed out by Old Madam. But she didn't dare to tell Old Madam about it. She just hoped that Xiao Wanru could let her go. Fifth sister, I really didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I was afraid. So I wanted to ask you to help me share some of the burden. Grandma has always loved you. With your help, she will definitely not punish me severely. Xiao Jie begged Xiao Wanru and sobbed. Her words sounded very honest, and she confessed that she had indeed lied just now. However, she had lied because she was afraid. Seeing that Xiao Wanru's expression remained unchanged, Xiao Jie continued, fifth sister, I really didn't mean it. I just accidentally touched the lamp when I was writing. Later, I couldn't put it out, so I wanted to run out to call for help. When I saw the fire, I was scared, so. Now Xiao Jie had to take all the blame. It was impossible to say that she had set the fire, but she could say that she had been careless. Seeing that Xiao Jie, who spoke more and more fluently and regretted more and more, Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. It was rare for Xiao Jie to be smart for once. She knew that it was impossible for her to quibble, so she had to take all the blame. She had accidentally taken all the blame. As long as the mansion didn't pursue the matter, it was useless for others to say anything. Old Madam, who was sitting in the upper seat, looked better. This was the best result. At present, Xiao Jie's words also explained the reason why she had been flustered before. It was much simpler than saying that she had set the fire herself. She turned to look at Xiao Wanru and saw that her pink little face was tense. It could be seen that she was very angry and annoyed. At present, no matter what Xiao Jie said, she just looked at Xiao Jie angrily and said nothing. Fifth sister, look. Old Madam's voice slowed down. Grandma, I don't want to forgive second sister. This time I started the fire. If she kills someone next time, will second sister blame me? There are so many people in the mansion, and I'm not very familiar with second sister. I don't understand why second sister doesn't push the blame to others, but must push it to me. Xiao Wanru interrupted Old Madam in a cold voice. She knew that Old Madam's intention was to turn the big matter into a small matter and the small matter into nothing. It would be better for her to accept this grievance in silence, but she didn't want to. She didn't intend to show her magnanimity with any sisterly affection. Fifth sister, it's indeed second sister's fault. Don't worry. I will punish her well. I can't let you suffer such a loss in vain. Old Madam comforted Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru shook her head firmly, but there were tears in her watery eyes. When she looked at Old Madam, her eyes were full of tears. Grandma, I know that I've been living outside since I was a child and I'm not close to my relatives in the mansion, but it's just on the surface. I'm getting closer to my relatives step by step, but my relatives are thinking about how to destroy me. Grandma, I won't forgive second sister. After Xiao Wanru finished speaking, she turned around and left in tears, leaving Xiao Jie on the spot. An appropriate show of weakness was to show a tough and unreconciled attitude, so as to avoid Old Madam's empty talk of sisterly affection. Old Madam wanted to stop Xiao Wanru, but seeing that she had already reached the door, she could only watch her leave. Then her eyes fell on Xiao Jie. It was this girl's fault. She told lies one after another, so that no one believed her now. Kneel down. Old Madam reprimanded her sternly. Seeing Xiao Wanru leave in such a tough manner, Xiao Jie had long been at a loss of what to do. Old Madam reprimanded her and hurriedly knelt down. She cried and said, Grandma, I really don't know, why did this happen? I really did as you said. When she said this, a teacup at her feet was smashed heavily. She was so scared that she immediately stopped talking and looked at Old Madam, who was sitting high above, in horror. Go, don't sleep tonight. Go to the Buddha hall at the back to calm down and get rid of the anger. If you don't keep your mouth shut, I'm afraid that you will even lose your life in the end. Old Madam reprimanded her gloomily. Two old maids came over and pulled Xiao Jie out. Xiao Jie did not dare to struggle. She just turned around and cried sadly, Grandma, Grandma. Chapter 837. The people of Minister Zhao's mansion got the news the next morning. After receiving the news, Old Madam of Minister Zhao's mansion was so angry that she came over in person. Old Madam met Old Madam Zhao in the flower hall. Xiao Zaihuan and Xiao Wanru accompanied Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, while Zhao Shiran came with Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. After everyone was seated, Old Madam Zhao didn't drink tea. She looked at Old Madam coldly and asked, What does your mansion mean? If you don't like Ran, we cannot marry each other. Why did you do such a thing? You said it was a very small courtyard, but now even this courtyard is gone, right? Seeing that Old Madam Zhao came to denounce them, Old Madam lowered her attitude and said with a smile, How can I not be satisfied with Miss Zhao? I have seen such a beautiful girl grow up. How can I not like her? But this is really an accident. Accident? You can burn all the furniture in Ran Er's dowry by accident. This is the furniture we have prepared for more than 10 years since Ran Er was a child. I didn't expect it to be destroyed before it was used. Old Madam Zhao coughed loudly. Zhao Shiran hurriedly stood behind Old Madam Zhao and gently patted her back. Only then did Old Madam Zhao come to her senses. Seeing her calm face and peaceful expression, Xiao Wanru slightly narrowed her watery eyes, and then slowly lowered her head to the ground in front of her. She quietly listened to the two old madams quarreling above. Xiao Caihuan was a little anxious. She had known what had happened last night early in the morning and even knew that Xiao Wanru was involved in it. But she didn't know the details. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was silent, she leaned over and asked with concern, "Fifth sister, do you feel uncomfortable?" Xiao Wanru shook her head and said nothing. "Fifth sister, if you feel uncomfortable, go to have a rest first. I will accompany grandma here." Xiao Caihuan became more and more concerned. She felt that Xiao Wanru didn't look very good today. Xiao Wanru did not look very good. After returning home, she didn't fall asleep immediately. She first thought about everything and then analyzed Wen Shiqi's character. She felt that it didn't seem like something Wen Shiqi would do. Shouldn't he be aloof from the world? Speaking of it, it actually had little to do with Wen Shiqi. Given Wen Shiqi's character, he really didn't seem to be the kind of person who would take the initiative to intervene. However, he intervened and even stood on her side. Xiao Wanru couldn't figure it out. Thinking about it, she fell asleep, but kept dreaming at night. There were scenes from his previous life, and there were also scenes from this life. Every time, it would end in a nightmare. The final scene was still that bloody scene. So many women had died. Was he crazy? Why was it like this? There was a vague answer in her heart that she didn't dare to believe. Despair and darkness. Had he died at that time? The pair of eyes blinded by despair and thick darkness? A person like him didn't even care about his own life, so how could he care about others? Xiao Wanru suddenly woke up from the nightmare and didn't fall asleep. She stopped thinking about Wen Shiqi and tried to think about what had happened after she entered the Imperial Palace in her previous life. What had happened to her after entering the Imperial Palace? How did she get to know Chu Luchen? Did she know Chu Luchen or did they really know each other? She was at a loss in her memory. She couldn't remember, had a headache, and was dull all night. Today, her face was as pale as snow. At first glance, it was obvious that she was not in good spirits. Xiao Wanru shook her head slightly and refused politely, "I'm fine. Thank you, third sister." While they were talking, old Madame Zhao had calmed down. She picked up the teacup at hand and took a sip. "Go ahead. Let's end this matter now. Of course, we will choose a good courtyard to prepare for the marriage again. Don't worry. We will definitely not let the first Miss Zhao feel aggrieved. The things we buy will only be of good quality. As for the burn part, we will definitely compensate you according to the original price. We will definitely make you satisfied." Old Madam promised repeatedly. Choose a good courtyard? I heard that it was a miss of your mansion who made a mistake this time. I also heard that this courtyard was chosen by the second miss of your mansion. Old Madame Zhao put down the teacup and said sarcastically. It was not easy to inquire about what happened last night, but it was not a secret that Xiao Jie had chosen a courtyard. Don't worry, old Madame Zhao. Since you are here, please help me choose this time. As long as you choose the right courtyard, our mansion will not say anything. Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion patted her chest repeatedly and promised. Xiao Wanru's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and her eyes were full of coldness. As expected, they came for her father's courtyard. In fact, Minister Zhao's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion had colluded to occupy the Chu Huan courtyard when her father was the heir of the mansion. The current show was just to shut her grandma up. If it was confirmed by Xiao Jie yesterday that she had really sent someone to talk to Xiao Jie, she would be blamed for it. She would say that it was because of the fault of a miss of the mansion. At that time, even if her grandma wanted to help her, she would not be able to say it. After all, it was probably she who had set the courtyard on fire. Otherwise, the courtyard would not have caught fire after Xiao Jie left. Moreover, if it was confirmed that her servant girl had been involved in it, old Madam would not investigate it. On the surface, she showed that she wanted to protect her, but in fact, she silently put the blame on her. This kind of silent attitude of not investigating it was the most harmful. Even if she wanted to defend herself, she could not. Moreover, she had to express her gratitude to old Madam. She gently pursed her lips. She wanted to see how they would act today and how they would occupy the Chu Huan courtyard. She raised her head as if she felt something and met Zhao Shiran's gentle eyes. Seeing Xiao Wanru looking back at her, she smiled softly, which was very gentle and made people have a good impression on her. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and continued to be a quiet listener, watching them continue to act. As for the first Miss Zhao, it seemed that she was not a simple character. Let's choose by ourselves? I'm afraid that if we choose at the right time, we will say that it's not good. Old Madame Zhao sneered. Of course not. As long as Old Madame likes it and it's empty, we can choose any courtyard. Old Madame promised again and again with a smile. She became more and more humble. Well, that's what your mansion promised. Don't go back on your word. Old Madame Zhao looked at Old Madame with satisfaction and said, Of course. Old Madame seemed to want to keep the peace. She pointed to Xiao Wanru and Xiao Zhehuan and said, These are my 2 granddaughters, the granddaughters of the first branch and the third branch respectively. Both of them also agreed to this matter. Third Miss Xiao, fifth Miss Xiao? Old Madame Zhao was not ignorant of the 2 of them. Her eyes fell on them, and the most important thing was Xiao Wanru. She looked at them carefully and nodded repeatedly. The 2 misses of your mansion are really as beautiful as pearls and immortal dew. They are really good. After saying that, she waved to them. Xiao Taihuan and Xiao Wanru stood up together. Old Madame Zhao took off a pair of bracelets from her hand, put one on Xiao Taihuan's hand, and was about to put the other on Xiao Wanru's hand. It's the first time we meet, and I don't have anything good. I'll give these bracelets to you too. Her attitude was very gentle, which was completely different from the way she treated Old Madame just now. She looked like an amiable elder. At first glance, Xiao Wanru knew that the bracelets were very valuable. Then she looked at Old Madame's other clothes. Although they were expensive, they were not ostentatious. Only the bracelets showed a different kind of magnificence. At first glance, it could be seen that they were specially prepared for young girls. The 3 rubies inlaid on them were shining in everyone's eyes. What's more, Old Madame had promised on her behalf just now. If she took the bracelets again, she would not be able to say no later. Even if her maternal grandmother came over, with her promise, her maternal grandmother could not say anything. One was tough, while the other was gentle. She wanted to deal with not only her but also her maternal grandmother. Xiao Wanru took a step back, avoided Old Madame Zhao's hand, and respectfully bowed sideways to Old Madame Zhao. I don't dare to accept such a valuable gift from you, Old Madame. Xiao Zaihuan, who had been looking at the bracelets in her hand happily, was stunned. She hurriedly took the bracelets from her hand and respectfully handed them over. Old Madame, this is really too valuable. We don't dare to accept it. Xiao Zaihuan tried her best to keep in line with Xiao Wanru. What had happened yesterday had made Xiao Wanru unhappy, so she did not intend to have another relationship with Xiao Wanru today. Even though Xiao Zaihuan was attracted by the bracelets and Old Madame on the side seemed to appreciate her actions, Xiao Zaihuan still felt that it was better to keep in line with Xiao Wanru at this time. Old Madame Zhao's smile froze on her face. She held the bracelets in her hand and looked back at Old Madame. The smile on Old Madame's face was also very ugly at this time. Although she was smiling, she did not look like she was really smiling. That was her fake smile. Third girl, fifth girl, we don't dare to refuse an elder's gift. Hurry up and thank Old Madame of Zhao. Old Madame took a deep breath and suppressed the anger and irritation in her heart. This was a slap in the face for her. She actually refused Old Madame of Zhao's mansion's kindness in front of her. Didn't this clearly mean that what she had said before did not count? Xiao Zaihuan hesitated. She looked at the bracelets in her hand and then at her grandmother's face. She did not know whether she should follow her heart and obey her grandmother's words this time. However, she was afraid that Xiao Wanru would be angry and turn back to peek at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru raised her head and looked at Old Madame with a little coldness and anger in her eyes. Old Madame inexplicably felt that something was wrong. She hurriedly said with a gloomy face, "Fifth girl, are you going to disobey me?" Chapter 8:38. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes slightly and said stubbornly, "Grandma, except for the courtyard where my father and mother live. Old Madame Zhao can choose all the empty courtyards in the mansion, but not my father's courtyard. Xiao Wanru said bluntly. She didn't want to give Old Madame an evasive attitude. Since she couldn't avoid it, she didn't want to avoid it anymore. That courtyard belonged to her father and mother, as well as the future heir of Duke Xing's mansion. Old Madame wanted to use this method to seize the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion and create the illusion that the heir of Duke Xing's mansion had been decided by Xiao Hua. She would never agree. In the last life, in order to seize the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion, they killed all the members of her family. How could this hatred be covered up by the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion? Old Madame Zhao was stunned and looked at the girl in front of her in disbelief. She was really just a gentle girl who gave people a very charming and moving feeling. But that was all. How could a girl from an aristocratic family be distinguished by her appearance? How could an orphan girl with no parents have the courage to say such words? Did she mean to embarrass her in front of her? Old Madame Zhao, who came to her senses, trembled with anger. She pointed at Xiao Wanru and said to Old Madame sternly, "Old Madame, is this how you teach your daughter? What are you talking about? You just promised to make it up to us. Is this how you make it up to us?" Wanru kneeled down and apologized to Old Madame Zhao. Old Madame's face darkened, and she scolded her sternly with cold eyes. "Grandma, I don't know what I did wrong. Why do you want me to apologize like this?" Xiao Wanru said lightly. She glanced at Zhao Shiran and saw the shock in his eyes. Obviously, she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru dared to say such words in front of Old Madame. Her eyes became gloomy for a moment. "You? How can you be so disrespectful to your elders?" Old Madame was very angry, but she couldn't really hit Xiao Wanru. Great Elder Princess would definitely not let her get what she wanted. The last plan made her fall behind Great Elder Princess, so she cooperated with Old Madame Zhao. "Grandma, I'm just telling the truth. I'm afraid that Old Madame Zhao doesn't know it, so I made it clear in advance so that I won't be able to live in the courtyard and make things difficult for you," Xiao Wanru said coldly. Old Madame was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. Old Madame Zhao looked Xiao Wanru up and down, and then a trace of contempt flashed in her eyes. Xiao Wanru really grew up in a small place. It seemed that she didn't even know basic etiquette. How dare she say such words? Did she get her confidence from Great Elder Princess? But even Great Elder Princess had no reason to interfere in the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion all the time. "Fifth Miss Xiao, right? What you said is actually wrong. Your father and mother have been dead for so long. Is it possible that this courtyard has been empty all the time and no one lives here?" Old Madame Zhao said coldly. "Why not? This courtyard isn't meant for others to live in anyway." Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. She did not feel so much pressure when facing Old Madame Zhao. After all, Old Madame Zhao was not her official elder on the surface. "I heard that Fifth Miss Xiao came from an ordinary family. Is this the rule taught in your mansion in the past?" Old Madame Zhao said sarcastically, "You are really narrow-minded. But now you are the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Don't bring your bad habits to Duke Xing's mansion and forget your current identity." "Thank you for reminding me, Old Madam. I know my identity, so I want to keep the courtyard where my father and mother live. There are many empty courtyards in the mansion. If First Miss Xiao is satisfied, you can use the courtyard where I live. I can choose a courtyard to live in for the time being," Xiao Wanru said with a smile. It seemed that she had taken a step back. In order to keep the last memory of her father and mother, she was even willing to give up her courtyard. The meaning in her words was sad. Old Madame Zhao was so angry that her hands trembled. Xiao Wanru was going to marry Prince Qin 2 months later. If she was asked to give up her previous courtyard for Xiao Hua and to use as a bridal chamber at this time, not only Duke Xing's mansion would be criticized, but also Minister Zhao's mansion would not be able to afford it. Xiao Wanru was the future Prince Chen's wife. Although Old Madame Zhao didn't think that Prince Chen really treated Fifth Miss Xiao well, Xiao Wanru's identity was there. After Xiao Wanru got married, she would be a first-class princess. Even Old Madame Zhao had to salute her when she saw her. No one could afford the reputation of forcing her to give up her courtyard. However, Xiao Wanru was not married yet. A married woman regarded her husband's family as her heaven, while an unmarried woman regarded her father's family as her heaven. She had no reason to resist now. She turned her head and did not say anything to Xiao Wanru. She looked at old madam angrily and said, "If this is the attitude of 5th Miss Xiao in our mansion, it's better not to make this marriage. The girls in our mansion really dare not have a sister-in-law like 5th Miss Xiao. She has put on the airs of a prince's wife before marrying into our mansion." Her sarcasm was a slap in the face. No matter what, Xiao Wanru had not married yet, let alone married into the royal family. "Grandma." Zhao Xiran reached out to gently pull old Madame Zhao's arm a few times and called her softly. It seemed that she did not want old Madame Zhao to blame Xiao Wanru like this. Old Madame Zhao also seemed to be angry. After saying that, she stood up and was about to leave with Zhao Xiran. "Old Madame Zhao, please wait a minute." Old Madame hurriedly stood up to stop her. If old Madame Zhao really left, the marriage between the two families would be ruined. Old Madame was very satisfied with this marriage. Fifth girl, apologize to old Madame Zhao. As she said, she turned to Xiao Wanru and reprimanded her. Xiao Wanru stood aside indifferently, as if she did not know that this matter was going to get out of hand. Seeing the scene in front of her, old Madame Zhao was so angry that her face turned livid. "Okay, the 5th Miss of our mansion is so nice. She is not satisfied with our Ran. Well, since our Ran is not recognized by 5th Miss Xiao, the future Princess Chen, we'd better go back, so as not to get into such an embarrassing situation. 5th girl, why don't you kneel down?" Seeing that things had come to this point, old Madame was so angry that she reached out and wanted to slap Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru took a step back and avoided old Madame's slap. When she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a leisurely voice from the door. "Did I come at the wrong time?" The man's clear voice stunned everyone in the flower hall. They turned around and saw Chu Luchen standing at the door with a gentle smile on his face. It seemed that Chu Luchen had accidentally barged in. He raised his beautiful eyes slightly, looked at the stiff faces of the people in the flower hall, and then walked in slowly. Dressed in a dark blue official robe, he looked noble and extraordinary, but with a trace of sickly beauty. As soon as he appeared, he stunned everyone in the flower hall. The butler of Duke Xing's mansion behind him was anxious. It was not that he didn't want to stop Prince Chen, but the problem was that he couldn't stop him. It was too late to call his master immediately. After Prince Chen entered the door, he asked old Madame Zhao for the location of the flower hall to enter the mansion, and then took him to lead the way all the way. But what happened? Chu Liuchen's beautiful eyes wandered, glanced at the people in the flower hall roughly, and walked in. The two old madams reacted quickly and hurriedly saluted to him. Although Chu Luchen rarely appeared in front of others, they would go to the palace to accompany the Empress Dowager from time to time, so they had seen him several times and recognized his identity at a glance. It was the first time for Zhao Xiran to see Chu Luchen, so he looked at Chu Luchen in surprise. This was Prince Chen, who everyone said would not live long. But now he looked no different from a normal person in other aspects, except that his face was a little pale and his lips were a little pale. When her eyes were swept by Chu Liuchen's eyes, she immediately blushed and hurriedly bowed sideways. She only felt that her heart was beating rapidly, and she was as shy as a little girl. Zhao Xiran was the first miss of Minister Zhao's mansion, and there were several younger sisters and younger brothers. In the past, she rarely lost her composure like this. She couldn't help thinking of the rumors among the misses of aristocratic families. They all said that Prince Chen was unparalleled handsome and the most outstanding man in the whole capital city. Unfortunately, he was congenitally deficient and sick. Otherwise, with such a noble and handsome face, how many women wouldn't want to marry him? Even she almost lost her mind at this moment. Zhao Xiran almost lost her mind, and Xiao Zaihuan really lost her mind. Her veil was still on her face, so her expression couldn't be seen, but she looked at Chu Luchen almost stupidly. If she could only be a concubine in this situation, she would be more willing to be Chu Liuchen's concubine than Commandery Prince Qing. Xiao Wanru also bowed sideways and said, "Greetings, Your Highness. Dispense with the formalities." Chu Luchun said casually, and then stood beside Xiao Wanru. He reached out to help Xiao Wanru, and said with an increasingly gentle look, "What's wrong? What happened just now?" Old Madame Zhao stood up, and her heart beat rapidly. She was not as excited as Zhao Shiran, but shocked. Everyone in the Imperial Palace knew that Prince Chen seemed gentle, but in fact he was very ruthless. If someone provoked him, he would act extremely coldly. Moreover, he was protected by the Emperor and the Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace. Even the masters in the Imperial Palace would take a detour when they saw Prince Chen, not to mention the officials like them. They were afraid of accidentally provoking this devil. What was the meaning of the current situation? Did Prince Chen really love 5th Miss Xiao? Old Madame Zhao frowned and felt that it was better to think about the matter she had discussed with Old Madame before. "Nothing. I just want to talk about the courtyard where my father and mother used to live." Xiao Wanru stood up and said softly, "What happened to their courtyard? Could it be that my uncle has issued a decree to decide on the heir of Duke Xing for you?" Chu Luchun said slowly with a smile on his lips. He glanced at Old Madam with a faint smile and said, "Congratulations, Old Madam. After so many years, the position of the heir of Duke Xing has finally been decided. It can be said that the dust has settled." "Your Highness, you must be joking. How can this matter be decided so casually?" Old Madam replied sullenly. She could suppress Xiao Wanru in front of her just now, but she did not dare to be rude in front of Prince Chen. "All right, then this king might have misunderstood," Chu Luchun said casually. He turned his handsome eyes and said with a charming look, "I heard that there is the handwriting left by the former heir of Duke Xing in that courtyard. I wonder if Old Madam can let me have a look?" Chapter 839. Xiao Xuanzi stepped back calmly, thinking that he'd better stay away from his master. Needless to say, his master was angry. Judging from the situation when he came in just now, he knew that people in the flower hall were forcing 5th Miss Xiao. Xiao Xuanzi stole a glance at the two old madams above. These two really dared to bully anyone. They didn't know that 5th Miss Xiao would be under his master's control now. "Your Highness, there is actually nothing to see in that courtyard. If you want to see it, you can." Old Madam's face was not very good. She could hear the unkindness in Chu Liuchun's words. Old Madam was not stupid. She just thought that this situation was unlikely to happen, but what did it mean now? Did Prince Chen really care about Xiao Wanru? Then can I trouble Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion and 5th Miss Xiao to take me to have a look? Chu Luchun said with an elegant smile, "But just now I heard that Minister Zhao's mansion also wants to have a look at this courtyard. Why don't we go together?" Old Madame Zhao was stunned, and her face became very ugly. She hurriedly shook her hand and said, "I dare not. Your Highness, please go ahead." "If it's not Old Madam's idea, then it's Miss Zhao's idea?" Chu Luchun turned his eyes to Zhao Shiran, who was standing beside him, and his eyes became more and more shining. Zhao Shiran hurriedly lowered her head, and her heart beat wildly. She was half scared and half shy. She hurriedly bowed and replied, "I dare not." "Old Madame Zhao, are you really not going to have a look with us? I happen to be free today, so I can accompany you too." Chu Liuchun's eyes turned and fell on the two old madams who seemed to be nervous. "Your Highness, you are welcome." Old Madam raised her smile and said a little stiffly, "Your Highness, our Zhao's mansion doesn't mean this. It's just that the bridal chamber we prepared last night was burned down, and we want to choose another one in Duke Xing's mansion. In fact, we have no intention of choosing the courtyard of the former heir of Duke Xing," Old Madame Zhao respectfully said to Chu Luchun, and then said to Old Madam, "No one is willing to do this kind of thing. Since it has been burned down, please prepare another courtyard. Time is a little tight. If we don't arrange this marriage well, then 5th Miss Xiao's marriage will be too hasty." Her words were sincere and reasonable, which made people feel comfortable, especially when she praised Chu Luchun at the end. Old Madame Zhao felt bitter in her heart. She really didn't know that Prince Chen would care about this marriage. When Old Madame discussed it with her before, she only said that they would work together to deal with Ru and Great Elder Princess and force Ru and Great Elder Princess to make a concession and give up the empty Chu Huan courtyard. He didn't expect that Prince Chen would be involved. Minister Zhao was the minister of the Ministry of Works. When he returned to the mansion, he occasionally mentioned Prince Chen. Old Madame Zhao knew that Prince Chen was valued by the Emperor and the Empress Dowager and was much more important than the other princes. Sometimes Minister Zhao vaguely said that if Prince Chen recovered, it was uncertain who would inherit the throne in the future. Originally, Old Madame Zhao didn't even care. She heard that the prince had been in poor health and it was uncertain whether he could live for a few more years. Now she saw that although the prince looked sicker and weaker than ordinary people, he basically didn't have a big impact. Moreover, he was wholeheartedly protecting the fifth Miss Xiao. Old Madame Zhao was very upset. She really wanted to reconsider the relationship with Duke Xing's mansion. If it weren't for the fact that the marriage between the two mansions had been settled and it happened to be arranged before the marriage between Xiao Wanru and Prince Chen, if something went wrong with their marriage, it might affect Prince Chen's marriage in the end. Old Madame Zhao even had the thought of breaking off the engagement. Would the position of heir of Duke Xing really fall into Xiao Hua's hands? Originally, an important factor for the engagement between the two families was that Xiao Hua would become the heir of Duke Xing and become Duke Xing in the future. At the very beginning, Madame of Duke Xing repeatedly mentioned this matter, and she was very sure that it would happen. At that time, Duke Xing's mansion had no other rivals, so everyone didn't care much about Xiao Yuanhao, the son of the former heir of Duke Xing. On the one hand, he was still young, and on the other hand, he was useless and couldn't compare with Xiao Huan at all. But later, because of Xiao Wanru, the marriage was delayed for 3 years. In the end, it was found that Xiao Wanru's intervention didn't change the principle of the marriage, so the two mansions settled the marriage. Later, because Xiao Wanru and Chu Luqian didn't have time to get married, their marriage was also advanced. But even so, old Madame Zhao didn't care much. In Duke Xing's mansion, this fifth Miss Xiao had no power at all, and she was still an unmarried girl. Even if she got married in the future, she would wholeheartedly serve Prince Chen, who was seriously ill. How could she have time to care about the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion? Moreover, as a married woman, she didn't have much power to manage the inheritance of her maiden family. At most, she could only say something on the side and couldn't make a decision. But in the current situation, old Madame Zhao felt that she had never thought of it. She really wanted to break off the marriage. Don't worry, old Madame Zhao. It will be settled immediately. Today, we will choose a good yard as the bridal chamber and try our best to decorate the room for the newlyweds. As for the furniture sent by your mansion, we will make up for all of them. Your mansion will be satisfied. Old Madame also knew that there was nothing she could do today. She forced a stiff smile on her face and tried to deal with this matter well. That's good. Then we'll leave first. Old Madame Zhao couldn't stay any longer. She said goodbye to Old Madame, bowed to Chu Luqian, and walked out with Zhao Shiran. Chu Luqian didn't stop them. He watched them leave with a smile. After the people of Minister Zhao's mansion left, he turned to Old Madame and asked, "Old Madame, can we go and have a look?" "Prince Chen, please." Old Madame had to smile. Prince Chen wanted to have a look, and his words were directed to her, so she could only accompany him. Old Madame went, and Xiao Wanru followed her. As for Xiao Zaihuan, of course, she also went with them. The group of people went to Chu Huan Courtyard. When they arrived at Chu Huan Courtyard, the words on the huge screen wall were still there. Xiao Wanru stood in front of the screen wall and looked at the words written on it. She raised her head and read down the words one by one. As she read, her eyes turned slightly red. Her father's words were right in front of her, but the figure in her memory was so far away that she almost couldn't remember it. It was originally a memory from her childhood, but because she had been reborn, the distance between them had become even greater. Now that she saw his words again, it suddenly became clear. She bit her lip and tried hard to suppress the grief in her heart, but there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. In her last life, she didn't have a chance to see her father's figure or traces of his life until she died. All of this had been buried by Duke Xing's mansion, including the lives of herself and her relatives. "Old Madam, the former heir's courtyard is really good." Chu Liuqian's voice came into her ears with a little smile. Xiao Wanru looked sideways and saw that he was talking to Old Madam, so she didn't answer. At this time, she was in a very bad mood and was not in the mood to answer. It was the best that Chu Luchen didn't ask her. This was originally the best courtyard in the whole Duke Xing's mansion, and it was for the eldest son to live in at that time. But I didn't expect that the eldest son would end up like this. After he lost his temper and went out, he just died outside. Seeing the screen wall, old Madam also thought of her eldest son. For a moment she felt sad and choked with sobs. Is the courtyard where Duke Xing lives now not as good as this? Chu Luchen didn't seem to notice old Madam's abnormality and continued to raise his head to ask. The courtyard where the second son lives now is also good. Old Madam had to suppress her sadness, gently wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and answered. Xiao Jing now lived in the courtyard where the previous Duke Xing lived, so how could it not be good? Old Madam didn't dare to hide this kind of thing. There is such a courtyard. Old Madam, can you let me see it? There are also a few empty courtyards in my mansion. In the future, I will set up a courtyard for the inheritance of the heir, and the other one will be the courtyard where I live. The layout of Duke Xing's mansion is good, and I can take reference. Chu Luchen walked 2 circles along the screen wall and asked Old Madam with a smile. His attitude was very kind and peaceful. Xiao Taihuan stared at Chu Luchen closely. Looking at Chu Luchen's behavior and appearance, which was like a handsome young master coming out of an ink painting, her heart beat wildly. She originally had feelings for Chu Luchen, and at this time, her feelings were even more scorching. If she could marry such a person, even if she followed him as a concubine, it would be much better than following Commandery Prince Qing. The temperature in her heart was burning, and the temperature on her face was also burning. She had always wanted to say something, but she couldn't. At this time, hearing Chu Liuchen's words, she immediately said, "Grandma, I happen to be free, so I can accompany Prince Chen to second uncle's courtyard to have a look." After saying that, she lowered her head shyly, and her face blushed brilliantly. However, her face was still covered by a light veil, so it was not obvious that she was blushing and shy. Hearing Xiao Zaihuan's words, Old Madam became even angrier. When she saw Xiao Zaihuan's shy look, she was so angry that she wanted to slap Xiao Zaihuan to wake her up. Was this what an unmarried miss from an aristocratic family should say? Moreover, there was Xiao Wanru, who was more suitable than her, by her side. Xiao Wanru was the most suitable person to accompany Chu Luchen. They would get married in 2 months, so she didn't feel it was a big deal even if she was a little rude. What did Xiao Zaihuan mean? Could it be that she liked Prince Chen? Old Madam only felt that it was extremely absurd. What do you mean, Old Madam? Chu Luchen glanced at Xiao Wanru, who was still immersed in sadness, and said slowly. The smile on his face slowly disappeared, and his handsome eyes narrowed slightly. A chill overflowed from his handsome face, with a murderous look that was difficult to be ignored. He was facing Old Madam, and Xiao Zaihuan, who was behind him, happened to not see that his face had changed. She was still immersed in the beautiful hope. She was really willing to take Chu Luchen to have a look. Old Madam, however, saw Chu Liuchen's cold face and knew that it was not good. Xiao Zaihuan had offended His Highness, but inexplicably, an extremely exciting idea suddenly flashed in her heart. Chapter 840. Since Your Highness Prince Chen wants to have a look, I will naturally accompany you. Old Madam nodded, but she did not directly mention Xiao Zaihuan, nor did she pay attention to what Xiao Zaihuan had said before. Fifth Miss, do you want to stay and have a look at the screen wall or accompany the prince to have a look at your second uncle's courtyard? Old Madam turned to Xiao Wanru and asked. Xiao Wanru was immersed in the sadness of the past. The Chu Huan courtyard could not be entered at any time. Even if she wanted to enter, she had to get Old Madam's consent. It was rare for her to have such a chance to stay and have a look, so she naturally did not want to leave. Xiao Wanru shook her head gently, restrained the sadness at the bottom of her eyes, and said, Grandma, I still want to see my father's smile again. Well, you can have a look here first. Third Miss and I will accompany His Highness to have a look at your second uncle's courtyard. Old Madam said. Xiao Wanru nodded and glanced at Chu Luchen beside her. When she saw his face, she could not help but frown slightly. This prince did not look very happy. Seeing Xiao Wanru turn her eyes, Chu Luchen suddenly smiled and said gently to her, "Then you can have a look here first. I will come to you later." "Yes, your highness." Xiao Wanru bowed sideways and was more respectful in front of others. Of course, she did not find a reason to refuse. Her attitude made Chu Luchen feel a little better. He turned around and walked out. Old Madam winked at Xiao Caihuan and immediately followed him. Xiao Caihuan fell into a state of self-reproach after her words were directly ignored by Chu Liuchen's Old Madam. At this time, after receiving Old Madam's wink, she immediately became overjoyed and hurriedly ran a few steps to catch up with Chu Luchen. She was very happy in her heart. Xiao Caihuan left Xiao Wanru alone and took her with him. Was this intended by Grandma? Xiao Caihuan was both shy and excited, feeling that her whole heart was about to jump out. She felt more and more aggrieved. Why was it not Xiao Wanru but herself in the palace at that time? If Xiao Wanru had been poisoned at that time and had so many sores on her face, she would have been sent out of the palace at that time, and she would have been the legitimate Princess Chen. Just thinking of this made her extremely excited. She almost foolishly looked at Chu Liuchen's handsome back. If such a man could really marry her, what else could she ask for in this life? Xiao Caihuan didn't dare to get too close to Chu Luchen, but she didn't want to be too far away. She trotted 2 steps behind Chu Luchen and looked at him affectionately from time to time. Even Old Madam on the side glanced at her from time to time, but she didn't notice it. She focused all her attention on Chu Luchen. Seeing Xiao Caihuan's almost irrepressible obsession, Old Madam frowned and suddenly felt that her idea was not so good. The group of people stopped at the gate of Duke Xing's courtyard. Xiao Jing's courtyard was called Luofeng Courtyard, which was not in the inner courtyard. It was a separate courtyard in the outer courtyard. If he wanted to live in the inner courtyard, he would live in the courtyard of Madame of Duke Xing or other concubines. There was no separate courtyard for him in the inner courtyard. When he entered, the first thing he saw was a pavilion. It was located in a remote corner of the courtyard. If it wasn't for its prominent position, this pavilion would actually be very inconspicuous. This place is really high. Chu Luchen sighed deeply after standing still. This was originally a place where second uncle read books and rest, but because it is a little high, it is usually not used. Second uncle has another study for rest. Xiao Caihuan hurriedly stepped forward and explained. "Is it empty?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and asked. "It is empty, and there should be some sundries in it. I heard that few people go in here, so it has basically been abandoned. But because it is in second uncle's courtyard, he usually sends someone to clean it." Xiao Caihuan was very attentive. Hearing that Prince Chen actually talked to her, she was full of joy. Chu Luchen glanced at Xiao Caihuan coldly, and there was some coldness in his eyes, with the air of autumn and winter. Just one look showed a sense of coldness. However, at this time, Xiao Caihuan's mind was full of Chu Liuchen's gentle face and voice, so she didn't notice that his face had changed. Old Madam coughed in a low voice and scolded Xiao Caihuan, "Third maid, come to Grandma. Don't gossip if you don't know these things. Don't take what you heard as the truth and tell it to Prince Chen." Xiao Caihuan was inexplicably scolded and felt wronged, but she had to retreat to Old Madam's side. She lowered her head and pulled the handkerchief in her hand, feeling helpless and wronged. "Old Madam, do you mean that this pavilion has other uses?" Chu Luchen ignored Xiao Caihuan's entanglement. In his eyes, he couldn't see the shyness of other women at all. He looked up at this tall building, and there was a trace of deepness at the bottom of his eyes. This pavilion was actually very strange. This was originally a pavilion built in the early days of the public house. It was the main courtyard and also the main courtyard of the High Duke. With such a pavilion, one could usually handle affairs here, directly receive guests here, and even enjoy the scenery from above. However, later on, they felt that this was not good, so they built another study room. Old Madam explained. "Why is it not good? You can directly receive guests in the courtyard, and you can also rest and enjoy the scenery. Isn't it a good thing?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and asked lazily. "It was good at first, but later?" Old Madam said hesitantly, as if she didn't know what to say. Oh, could it be that there are other mysteries in it? Chu Liuchen's interest was aroused, and he looked at the pavilion that was obviously a little abandoned. Since he said so, old madam could only go on. It's not that there is any mystery. This courtyard was originally prepared for the eldest son, and the eldest son even moved some things here. It was originally for convenience when he moved in, but I didn't expect that in the end. Speaking of this, old madam sighed sadly and shook her head. Old madam sighed sorrowfully and shook her head with a bitter voice. When she thought of her eldest son, she couldn't help feeling sad. Later, my second son moved in. I didn't want him to throw away his belongings, so I asked him to move into this high-rise building. Then, this attic was left empty. It didn't matter much. My second son didn't like this attic very much, and it was in the corner of the courtyard. My second son wanted to build a study room in it. The former heir of Duke Xing's things. Chu Liuchen was quite surprised by this result. The former heir of Duke Xing's things couldn't be put in the previous courtyard? The eldest son and Infanta Qinghua lived in the previous courtyard. Infanta Qinghua had been living in it since she got married. When Infanta Qinghua married, she brought a lot of things, so the eldest son moved some things here. After that, the things in Chu Huan courtyard were mainly taken care of by Infanta Qinghua. Old madam explained. This statement was very reasonable. The former heir of Duke Xing moved some things to Duke Xing's courtyard. As his father, Duke Xing would directly teach the former heir of Duke Xing at that time that it was normal to put some things here, so that he wouldn't go to the backyard to get something every time he needed it. Chu Liuchen nodded and didn't ask any more. He was satisfied with old madam's explanation and walked into the courtyard. There were 2 servants guarding at the gate of the courtyard. Seeing old madam coming over and looking at Chu Liuchen's appearance, they knew that he was not an ordinary guest, so they hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Is the Duke here? Old madam asked. The Duke is not in the courtyard. He hasn't come back yet. A servant answered cleverly. Old madam frowned. What was Xiao Jing doing at this time when such a thing happened yesterday? But she couldn't ask in front of Chu Liuchen, so she could only say, "Open the gate. Prince Chen wants to come in and have a look." Since old madam had said so, the servant certainly didn't dare to refuse. They opened the gate of the courtyard, and Chu Liuchen walked in slowly. After entering the gate, he found that there was also a huge screen wall at the gate, which was similar to the screen wall in Chu Huan courtyard, which was very surprising. Did all the descendants of Duke Xing's mansion have such a habit? Chu Liuchen went to the screen wall and found that it was no different from other screen walls. There was only a painting on it. When he went back inside, it was also a painting. Standing in front of the painting, Chu Liuchen looked at it carefully and slightly raised the corners of his mouth. Old madam thought that he seemed to be in a good mood, so she exhaled heavily. She was afraid that Prince Chen would be angry, but she couldn't see it. At this time, it seemed that he was fine, so it was not a big deal. Prince Chen should have seen that he had forced Xiao Wanru in the flower hall before, but he could still smile at the moment, which showed that Xiao Wanru was not so important in Prince Chen's heart. Now that Chu Liuchen didn't leave, she couldn't leave either. She could only stop and wait for Chu Liuchen to finish looking at it. Xiao Taihuan stood at the side of Chu Liuchen. Seeing the clear smile on Chu Liuchen's face, she also smiled. She rubbed the handkerchief in her hand again and again with a little shyness. She wanted to go up and talk to him, but she was afraid of being scolded by her grandmother. She wondered when she could be alone with Prince Chen. Old madam, who painted this picture? Chu Liuchen's attention fell on the painting, and he asked after looking at it for a while. I don't know who painted it. When it was rebuilt, it was customized by our Duke. I don't care about these things. Old madam shook her head. She really didn't know these things, so she couldn't answer even if she wanted to. In fact, Duke's mansion had existed for a long time, and it was their ancestral home. But some places were destroyed in the war. This was the place that had been destroyed, and it was rebuilt later. But old madam only knew that it was rebuilt, and she didn't know how it was built. Chu Liuchen didn't care. He just looked at the style of the painting carefully and asked, "Do you know if the craftsmen who built this courtyard are still there?" Those craftsmen? Old Madam hesitated for a moment and gave the answer hesitantly, Your Highness, I really don't know who they are, but the old butler may know something. If you want to know, I will ask someone to call the old butler over. Chapter 841. Old Madam answered carefully and tried to make her words sound perfect, for fear of accidentally offending Prince Chin. She heard that Prince Chin was moody, unpredictable, and very bad. He was not the gentle person she saw in front of her. Old Madam had seen his cold face just now. Let's wait for a while. I'm not in a hurry, Chu Luchin said casually. His smile was light but a little impatient. Old Madam frowned secretly. She didn't know how she offended this devil. She didn't know what to say at the moment and could only follow Chu Luchin carefully. Chu Luchin didn't say anything and walked forward with his hands clasped behind his back. Seeing that he just walked around the yard and didn't go to the main room, Old Madam breathed a sigh of relief. She was afraid that Prince Chin would go into the room regardless of anything and she couldn't stop him. Your mansion hasn't chosen an heir yet? Chu Luchin suddenly stopped and glanced sideways at Old Madam with a smile. It was difficult to answer this question, so Old Madam became more cautious. It's not urgent for the time being. We have to wait and see. Who does Old Madam like? Chu Luchin asked again. I haven't thought about it yet. Old Madam didn't dare to mention Xiao Hua An's name. You haven't thought about it yet. It can be seen that your mansion's first young master is actually not very useful. Chu Luchin turned and walked out of the yard. Old Madam didn't dare to answer. She pretended not to hear it and followed him out of the yard with her head lowered. Old Madam, please help yourself. I'm going to see Fifth Miss Xiao. After going out of the door, Chu Luchin waved his hand like a master and said. Old Madam was supposed to follow him, but what Chu Luchin said just now made her speechless for a moment. She was afraid that Prince Chen would say something sharper later. Saihuan, accompany Prince Chen. After thinking for a while, Old Madam calmed down and said to Xiao Saihuan with a smile. Yes, Grandma. Xiao Saihuan was overjoyed. After bowing sideways to Old Madam, she raised her head ecstatically. She finally had a chance to get along with Prince Chen. How could she not be happy? Without her grandmother keeping an eye on her, she could talk to Prince Chen. Did Old Madam ask her to follow me to keep an eye on me? Chu Luchin glanced at Xiao Saihuan lightly and asked. How would I dare to have such thoughts? I'm just afraid that your highness doesn't know the way. Old Madam hurriedly explained. She did not dare to take a deep breath. She really did not dare to offend his highness. Just let a servant lead the way. Could it be that the third miss of your residence is familiar with this prince? Madam Dowager doesn't care about the inconvenience of a man and a woman. I'm not married yet. If my reputation is ruined, it will be hard for me to explain. Chu Luchin said unhappily. His cold eyes swept over Xiao Saihuan with sarcasm. Xiao Saihuan's face turned pale at first and then turned red. Old Madam's face turned blue and white. She was too ashamed to show her face. Although she did have such thoughts, it was really shameful to hear Chu Luchin say it in front of her. What's more, the meaning of his words was very embarrassing. Even Old Madam could not resist it, and her face turned red in the end. Your Highness, I'm sorry for my rudeness. Come on, lead His Highness to Chu Huan Courtyard. Old Madam bowed her head and said. Seeing this, Nanny Yu hurriedly stood up to lead the way for Old Madam. After Chu Luchin left with Nanny Yu, Xiao Saihuan burst into tears. At that moment, she was so ashamed that she could not show her face. She just thought that there was a hole in the ground, and she would go into it and never come out. What are you crying for? Useless thing. Old Madam said coldly. Xiao Saihuan was not the only one who was embarrassed. She glared at Xiao Saihuan. If she had not been so obvious, she would not have such an idea, and now she was severely humiliated by Chu Luchin. Grandma! Xiao Saihuan cried so hard that she could not make a sound. Go back. If you cry again, your face will be ruined. At that time, no one will want you. You don't have to think about something that you can't get. Old Madam was in a bad mood. At this time, she was not in the mood to comfort Xiao Saihuan, so she scolded her sternly. After that, She turned around and left with a group of people, leaving Xiao Zaihuan sobbing, but she did not dare to cry again. She was also afraid that the scar on her face would not heal. Looking into the distance, she faintly saw Chu Liuchen's tall and straight figure. Why did such a beautiful man belong to Xiao Wanru? Why could Xiao Wanru win his kindness, but she could not? In fact, she did not ask for much. She did not want to ask for the position of princess, but couldn't she be his concubine? She stamped her feet hard, covered her face, turned around, and ran to her courtyard. She was going to find her father and ask him to help her. Since her father had a way to make Xiao Jie give up the marriage, he should also be able to get the position of a concubine from her fifth sister. She was also a concubine, but she wanted to marry into Prince Chen's mansion instead of Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. The carriage moved forward slowly, and it was very quiet in the carriage. After a long while, old Madame Zhao sighed and looked at her granddaughter sitting beside her with a little more love in her eyes. Ran, what do you think? Prince Chen should be satisfied with this marriage. Fifth Miss Xiao is the granddaughter of and Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess has always been close to the Empress Dowager. This reason has already made Fifth Miss Xiao different in Prince Chen's eyes. Prince Chen is very close to the Empress Dowager, so he will be close to the Great Elder Princess. Zhao Xiran analyzed calmly with a gentle face and a sense of indifference, as if what she said had nothing to do with her at all. Is that all? Old Madame Zhao shook her head. It was the first time for her to see Fifth Miss Xiao. She slowly followed her own thoughts and said, "It is said that this first Miss Xiao is the most beautiful. Even if she has fallen into such a situation, she still has infinite possibilities in the future. In my opinion, Fifth Miss Xiao is more outstanding. She has the beauty of a peony and the elegance of a peony. She is born charming but makes people feel distant and cold. She is a beautiful woman. Grandma, although there are few beauties in this world, there are not all of them. With Prince Chen's temperament, such a beauty can enter his heart, but it is impossible for him to always fall in love with her." Zhao Xiran's thoughts were similar to old Madame Zhao's. She had always been talented and knowledgeable. In terms of appearance, Prince Chen is incomparably handsome. Identity and appearance are part of it. With these, she will always have an advantage over other women. And if her brother becomes the heir of Duke Xing, it will be more beneficial for Prince Chen. Zhao Xiran said again. She said it as if she was not going to marry into Duke Xing's mansion and become Xiao Hua An's wife soon. He looked at this matter from a far, far away, transcendent position. If this is the case, Ran's marriage is a little inappropriate. Old Madame Zhao frowned tightly. At the beginning, she had chosen this marriage with the intention of making her granddaughter the wife of heir of Duke Xing. If it was only the first young master, it was not worthy of the identity of the eldest lineal granddaughter in her mansion. At this time, old Madame Zhao also regretted that she had agreed to her granddaughter's marriage at the beginning. She had thought that it would be a piece of cake, but because of Prince Chen's intervention, there were many uncertain factors. Zhao Xiran closed her mouth. Before she saw Prince Chen, she thought that Prince Chen would not care too much about Xiao Wanru. But just now it seemed that at least Prince Chen should treat Xiao Wanru differently. Although she did not know how much he cared about Xiao Wanru or whether it was all because of the external conditions, no matter what, he did care about Xiao Wanru at this time. She would not be wrong just now. If it's really not good, just refuse this marriage, okay? Seeing that she did not speak, old Madame Zhao persuaded in a low voice. In fact, old Madame Zhao had not been very optimistic about this marriage, so it had been delayed for so long. It had been discussed for about 3 years, and it was only now that it was settled. The reason was that she was not satisfied. In the end, it was Zhao Xiran who relented, so the marriage was settled again. But now old Madame Zhao regretted it again. Although it is not good for a girl to break off a marriage, we can think of a way to delay it first and let Duke Xing's mansion break off the marriage. Afraid that Zhao Xiran would feel wronged, old Madame Zhao persuaded. Grandma, there is no need to retreat. In fact, there is something we can do. Prince Chen may not be interested in Fifth Miss Xiao for a long time. We can just wait quietly. Zhao Xiran shook her head and said, Chu Liuchen's smiling face flashed in her eyes. He was handsome and extremely gentle. He seemed to be very gentle to everyone, right? Do you really want to marry into Duke Xing's mansion? Old Madame Zhao sighed. She felt that it was not a good idea, but because she loved her granddaughter too much, she let her make the decision herself. Her eldest granddaughter had always been a sensible and talented girl. Although she lived in the backyard, her talent was not comparable to her brother's. Her son had always said that if her eldest granddaughter had been a man, at least the status of the minister's mansion could be maintained for 20 or 30 years. It was just that she had been born a girl by mistake. Because of this, old Madame Zhao liked to discuss many things with her eldest granddaughter, and she also listened to her eldest granddaughter's words. She also loved her eldest granddaughter like a treasure. She was not worried about the marriage being delayed again and again. She always felt that her eldest granddaughter deserved better. In fact, the first young master of Duke Xing's mansion did not deserve her eldest granddaughter. When she went to Duke Xing's mansion to cooperate with old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion to put on a show, she also wanted to fight for her eldest granddaughter. It was obvious that her eldest granddaughter deserved better. Why did Duke Xing's mansion not give her the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion? Grandma, don't worry. Since this marriage has been made, no one can say what will happen in the future. Moreover, it is father's idea to marry into Duke Xing's mansion. Zhao Shiran said with a smile. Her eyes were gentle, and her smile was light. She was not shy at all when talking about this marriage. It seemed that she was talking about someone else's business. Although she had an extraordinary bearing, she always felt that she lacked the gentleness of a young girl who was about to get married. Seeing that old Madame Zhao still wanted to say something, Zhao Shiran shook her head with a smile and said, Grandma, don't persuade me. I know what I am doing. For the sake of father and the affairs of our mansion, I have no complaints. No matter what will happen in the future, I have no complaints. Only after marrying into Duke Xing's mansion could it be possible. She had to marry, whether she wanted to or not. What she wanted was not only the position of heir of Duke Xing's mansion. Chapter 842. When Chu Luchen came over, Xiao Wanru was still looking at the screen wall opposite quietly. Her eyes almost slid across it word by word. She read every word very carefully. As she read, she carefully recalled the faint figure at the bottom of the center. She bit her lip gently and swallowed the tears in her eyes. She didn't want to cry, let alone cry in front of the screen wall. This was the screen wall left by her father. Her father had written it word by word, from immature to powerful. Every stroke was her father's handwriting. Without her father, she was like duckweed or willow catkin. In her last life, she was scattered and trampled on by others. Of course, her father's words could not be kept. Now she would definitely keep this courtyard and this screen wall, and she would never let her father's works be covered in dust again. Are you still reading it? Chu Liuchen's voice came into her ears, which was very gentle. Father wrote it very well. Xiao Wanru sniffed and replied softly, still staring at the screen wall in front of her. Do you want to stay here? Chu Luchen obviously knew what Xiao Wanru was thinking. He reached out and pulled her hand, which was tightly clenched together. He held her hand with his slightly cold hand and wrapped her hand with his big hand. When his hand fell down, the wide sleeves slipped down, and the two hands could no longer be clenched. Although Chu Liuchen's hand was slightly cold, it was still a little warmer than Xiao Wanru's, which pulled her out of a cold environment at once. The bone-piercing chill seemed to spread from her limbs to her heart, and then from her heart to her limbs and all over her body. But now, because of Chu Liuchen's hand, she was pulled out of such a situation. She turned to look at Chu Luchen. His eyes had always been extremely beautiful. When he was happy, they would be extremely shimmering. When he was angry, they would also be extremely shimmering, as if they could reflect people's hearts. Being looked at by him clearly, Xiao Wanru's silent affection and doting love were clearly reflected in her eyes. Biting her lips, she became inexplicably nervous. She moved her hand, wanting to slide it out of his big hand. Unfortunately, his grip was too tight, and he didn't intend to loosen his grip at all. Because his grip was too tight, she even felt a kind of pain from his grip. However, this feeling also made her more and more awake. This was this life, not the previous life. Her hand slowly relaxed, allowing him to hold it tightly. Her eyes slightly drooped down, no longer carrying vigilance and nervousness. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, like the wings of a tired butterfly, revealing some fatigue. Suddenly, a force came from her hand, and her body uncontrollably moved forward and fell into a broad embrace. She heard Chu Liuchen's gentle voice, "If you want to cry, just cry. I'm here." Xiao Wanru subconsciously reached out to push him away, which was unreasonable. Although there were no outsiders here and they were inside the screen wall, it was impossible for others to see them. However, they were in Duke Xing's mansion. Although they were engaged, they hadn't gotten married yet, which was not very good. But the next moment, she suddenly dropped her hand to push him away. Then she put her arms around Chu Luchen and buried her head in his arms with great force. At this moment, her reason dissipated, leaving only uncontrollable feelings. Today, she had asked Qing to send a message and ask him to send someone over, but she didn't expect that he would come himself. When she saw Chu Luchen, her heart was very soft and warm. She was so excited and moved that she couldn't help but lose control of her behavior. After being stunned for a moment, Chu Liuchen's eyes became shimmering. He reached out to hold Xiao Wanru in his arms, patted her gently, and comforted her softly. "It's okay. They don't dare to treat you casually." As he said, a trace of hostility flashed across his shimmering eyes. Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion seldom appeared in the inner courtyard, so he couldn't do anything to her for the time being. But he could do something to Duke Xing. Chu Luchen never cared about the so-called elders in his heart. As long as Xiao Wanru hated it, he hated it. He just wanted to cherish her without principles. The body in his arms was petite and soft, making his heart beat inexplicably. It also brought him peace of mind, a peace he had never felt before. It was as if the missing piece in his heart had been filled up, making him feel complete. He didn't know when he put her in his heart and where he fell in love with her. This was the situation he was in now. From the moment he had his own consciousness, he knew that he hated the world, everything he saw, everything he knew, and more secrets. He also hated himself. Was it the fetus poison? He never cared about it, and he didn't intend to live a good life. Although he had secretly arranged a lot of contingency plans, the purpose of these contingency plans was not to get anything, but to disrupt or destroy something. Since he didn't like it, he would destroy it all. Destroying all of this, destroying himself along with everything. Wouldn't it be better to be completely clean? But all this changed at the moment when the girl in front of him slowly walked into his heart. He didn't know when he began to cherish his life and was no longer so indifferent. He began to actively cure his body, and he didn't want to die early. He wanted to live a good life and be with the girl in his heart. As his eyes fell on Xiao Wanru, he slightly pushed Xiao Wanru away and gently kissed her on her white and tender forehead. What he saw was her pink and tender cherry lips, which were delicate and charming at any time. But at this time, he really couldn't do anything outside. He sighed helplessly and let the surging feelings in his heart slowly calm down. In fact, he wanted more. But at this time, he could only restrain himself. It was not that he was not thick-skinned enough. He had always been reckless and cared about others' eyes, but he was afraid that his Zhuozhuo would be shy and angry, so he could only restrain himself. When would they get married? At that time, he could be with her unscrupulously. He took Xiao Wanru into his arms again, patted her slender back gently, and gave her silent support, letting her relax all her vigilance and lean quietly in his arms. Yu Jie and Xiao Xuanzi had already retreated to the screen wall, leaving everything here to the two of them. What kind of person is the first Miss Xiao? After a long while, Xiao Wanru asked softly, leaning on his chest, which sounded a little stuffy. I heard that she is a talented girl, different from the girls in the boudoir. She has a reputation of being as talented as a man. Chu Luchen said softly. Big brother is also a talent. Xiao Wanru added. A talent and a talented girl, a perfect match. Chu Luchen raised his handsome eyebrows and said in an extremely lazy voice. Why did they talk about the marriage for so long? I heard that they talked about the marriage when I returned to the family. Xiao Wanru asked again. They probably want to see the future of the first young master Xiao. Chu Luchen answered. Xiao Wanru fell silent. Did the so-called future refer to the position of the heir of the duke in the future? She would not allow Xiao Huan to get the position of the heir of the duke. This courtyard could only belong to her father. In the future, she would also keep it for Hao and not leave it to anyone else. She would not let anyone tear down the screen wall. This was the most complete memory left by her father. In the last life, she did not have this memory, nor did she know that she had this memory. In this life, she did not want to let go, even if she died. I want this place, Xiao Wanru said very calmly. This was the first time that she had told Chu Luchen what she wanted so calmly without any concealment. At this moment, she just felt that if she wanted it, she would say it directly. In front of Chu Luchen, she did not have to be so tired to disguise herself. She thought in this way and said it with a girl's willful pride. In fact, all of this had been far away from her in the last life. Then it's all yours. Chu Luchen looked at the girl in his arms with a smile and answered softly, as if what Xiao Wanru wanted was just a piece of jewelry or a piece of clothing, without any hesitation. He liked this kind of feeling of relying on her wholeheartedly, and he also liked Xiao Wanru's childish words. In fact, he did not have to be so tired. You can have whatever you want. Just do it boldly. I'm here for you, Chu Luchen said again with sparkling eyes. If it was his own intention, of course, he would protect Xiao Wanru by his side, so that she would not be hurt or bear any hardships. However, he also knew that Xiao Wanru had never been an ordinary girl. She was more willing to use her own means to get what she wanted. He had already known this when he saw the little girl's firm and decisive eyes for the first time. It was also because of this that he became interested in her and then stepped into her life step by step. He did not know where the love came from. Was it at this time or in the subsequent transactions? Chu Luchen did not know, and he could not find out. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth. If he had known that she was the person who could save him from the bottomless darkness, he would not have been so bad at that time. But now it was not too late. He would let her live a carefree life and provide her with a strong backing whenever she needed him. He would protect her in everything. She could move forward boldly with him at ease. As long as she wanted it, he would give it to her. Xiao Wanru blinked and then blinked again. She did not speak and bit her lips. She felt very bitter but extremely happy. At this moment, she wanted to cry, but she was no longer sad. Were they tears of joy? She did not know. She just felt like a person who had been trekking for a long time and had lost hope. Then she saw a warm smile, a doting look, and a kind embrace. Everything seemed very real and full of happiness. She silently raised the corners of her mouth. She liked this man, the prince who had seen her extremely bad at the beginning. Who is it? A scolding voice suddenly came from outside the screen wall. It was Xiao Xuanzi's voice. I was asked to come here by Old Madam. Old Madam wants to invite your highness to stay for lunch and ask for Prince Chen's opinion. The little servant girl, who was sent by Old Madam, stood trembling at the gate of the courtyard and said with a pale face, My master has something to do, so I don't want to bother Old Madam of your mansion. Xiao Xuanzi said bluntly. His master would go to the Imperial Palace to have lunch with the Empress Dowager later. How could he have time to accompany Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion? Xiao Xuanzi could not like anything that his master did not like. Yes, I will go and report it now. The servant girl hurriedly said, turned around and ran. Because of the panic, she accidentally hit the corner of the wall. She screamed in pain and limped away in a hurry. Chapter 843. In the wall, Xiao Wanru smiled silently and pushed Chu Liuchen's arms away. Because she leaned against Chu Liuchen's arms, her little face was flushed. What are you laughing at? Chu Luchen let go of her and asked in confusion, letting her stand beside him. Nothing. Xiao Wanru shook her head. Of course, she wouldn't tell Chu Luchen that she was very willing to see Old Madam's expression of wanting to be angry but not daring to be angry. Without Xiao Wanru's words, Chu Luchen also knew what Xiao Wanru was laughing at. He reached out his hand and flicked Xiao Wanru's forehead gently, and then said in distress, "Time passes too slowly. Your Highness, there's something urgent." Xiao Wanru reached out her hand to cover her forehead, looked at Chu Luchen with her watery eyes, and said discontentedly, "Of course there is. I'm not young anymore. I haven't married a princess yet, so I can't sleep late at night." Chu Luchen teased seriously. Xiao Wanru's face turned so red that it almost bled. This person was getting more and more thick-skinned. He could even say such words. The mysterious elegance he had shown when they first met had disappeared. Was this person really the Prince Qin she had seen before? "Your Highness, it's getting late. You'd better go back early." Xiao Wanru reached out her hand to push Chu Luchen and said with a blush. Seeing that she was so shy but pretended not to understand, Chu Luchen laughed and reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's hand again. This time, Xiao Wanru had been on guard. She stepped back and put her little hands behind her back. "When will you go back to the mansion with me?" Chu Luchen didn't take it seriously and laughed loudly. Looking at the shy girl in front of him, he became more and more happy. "Your Highness, you can go. Grandma has something to talk to me about." Xiao Wanru was shy. At this time, she couldn't stand it anymore, so she gave him a coquettish look and said, "Hey, I'll go back. Alas, I'm so unfortunate. I'll be thrown away after being used." Chu Luchen shook his head and looked helpless. Seeing this, Xiao Wanru blushed more and more. Was he more and more shameless now? "Do you want me to send you back?" Seeing that she was too shy to look at him, Chu Luchen changed the topic and asked with a smile. "No, you can go back first. I'll be there in a while." Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, "Are you sure? In fact, I'm quite useful as a flower guardian. Do you want to use me?" Chu Luchen asked. Looking at him talking nonsense with a serious face, Xiao Wanru felt that if she continued to watch him, she might not be able to help but want to beat him. She stretched out her hand and turned him around. "Wangye, you should go back first. I still have something to do, so I won't send you off." Chu Luchen pushed hard and took a few steps. Then he turned his head and asked with some doubts, "You really don't need me?" The smile at the bottom of her eyes almost overflowed. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and felt that she was wrong just now. The person in front of her was still the extremely nasty Prince Qin. Seeing that Xiao Wanru just stared at him without saying anything, Chu Luchen stopped teasing her and said with a smile, "Then I'm leaving." "Take care, Your Highness. I won't see you off." Xiao Wanru pouted slightly, stamped her feet, and said angrily, "I'll leave now. Do you want to know about Miss Xiao?" Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes and stopped teasing her. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and made a decision. What happened today? The first Miss Xiao was so calm as if she was a bystander, which made Xiao Wanru feel very strange. No matter how she looked at it, the first Miss Xiao didn't look like a new bride who was about to get married. No matter in front of old Madam or Xiao Wanru, she didn't show any shyness of a new bride. She was so generous. Or rather, it wasn't natural and unrestrained. Was it just an indifferent attitude? She heard that her elder brother loved Miss Xiao very much, and it was because of her that they finally got married after such a long time. She had thought that Miss Xiao must be the same. After all, she had been entangled with Xiao Hua, and for 3 years and finally got married. Xiao Wanru didn't believe that there was no affection between them. But now it seemed that it was not what she had imagined. What was the reason? The position of young madam of heir of duke? Xiao Wanru didn't figure it out at the moment. After Chu Luchen left, she thought for a while. Because she didn't know Zhao Shiran well, she couldn't think of it at the moment. She could only wait for Chu Luchen to send her the information about Zhao Shiran. Now she stopped thinking about it and went to old madam's Chuntang courtyard with Yujia. She had to go back and tell old madam that Chu Luchen had gone back. When she arrived at old madam's place, old madam was sitting in the main room drinking tea quietly. Hearing Xiao Wanru coming, she waved her hand to let her in. Xiao Wanru came in and bowed to old madam and sat down. "Your elder brother's courtyard was burned down. It's my fault. I shouldn't have locked your second sister in that courtyard to copy the so-called women's precepts. Otherwise, such a thing wouldn't have happened. Let's leave it at that." I will punish your second sister. There are many courtyards in the mansion. I just thought about it and found that the Chiohue courtyard, which is close to your courtyard, is not bad. What do you think? In fact, the Chiohue courtyard was not too close to Xiao Wanru's courtyard, but it was located at the edge of the first branch. It could be said to be the courtyard of the first branch or the second branch. I think it's good too, Xiao Wanru said softly. Xiao Huayan's previous courtyard was originally intended to be burned down by old madam, so she chose an inconspicuous one. Now Xiao Huan would not feel wronged if he didn't get the Chu Huan courtyard. Although Duke Xing's mansion simply divided the positions of the first branch, the second branch, and the third branch, in fact, it was not so clear. This courtyard could not be said to belong to the first branch. She had no reason to object, and she couldn't object. There were only her and Hao in the first branch. Hao was still living in Great Elder Princess's mansion. There were so many empty courtyards, so there was no reason to object. Now it was the second branch who was in charge. Strictly speaking, her niece was living under someone else's roof. Since she had to agree to it, and she had to agree to it, Xiao Wanru didn't say much. Old madam was satisfied with Xiao Wanru's tactfulness. After asking her a few more questions about what Chu Luchen had said just now, she let her go back. Xiao Wanru came out of old madam's courtyard and went to the Piaoyun courtyard. What would happen next was not up to her. Time was tight, but he believed that old madam had also prepared for it in advance. Perhaps not only old madam had prepared for it, but even her elusive second uncle had also prepared for it in advance. It should not be a good thing to burn it. As for the other things that had been prepared for it, it was naturally fast to set them up. However, there would be no more things for her. After such a thing happened, at least before they got married, they would not plot against the Chu Huan courtyard. In particular, Chu Luchen deliberately said those words today. Even if old madam and Xiao Jing had other ideas, they had to reconsider at this time. Fifth Miss, Duke Xing invites you over. As soon as she walked to an intersection, she saw an old maid coming in a hurry. When she saw Xiao Wanru, she came up to salute in surprise. Second uncle wants to see me? Xiao Wanru said in surprise. Chu Luchen did go to Xiao Jing's courtyard just now, but she did not go there. Wasn't it better to ask old madam and Xiao Caihuan instead of her? Yes, it's 5th Mississippi. Duke Xing has something to ask 5th Mississippi. Please go there. The old maid said with a smile. Xiao Wanru nodded, turned to the outer courtyard, and asked casually, when did second uncle come back? Did he meet Prince Jin? Chu Luchen did not say it just now, so she did not ask. She did not know if they met. Duke Xing just came back and did not meet Prince Jin. The old maid answered neatly. At first glance, she could tell that she was smart. Xiao Wanru was silent and followed the old maid all the way to the outer courtyard. Instead of going to Xiao Jing's courtyard, she went to Xiao Jing's study. In the past, when Xiao Jing had something to ask Xiao Wanru, he would go to this study. At the door of the study, the old maid asked Xiao Wanru to wait for a while and went in to report. Soon, Xiao Wanru was summoned to go in. Behind the large desk in the study, Xiao Jing sat there with a dignified look and looked at Xiao Wanru with scrutiny. Did he really underestimate his niece? Xiao Wanru stepped forward and bowed, and then stood aside with her head lowered. Sit down first. Xiao Jing said gently. Xiao Wanru nodded and sat down in a chair beside him. She put her hands on her knees and rubbed the handkerchief in her hands in confusion. It could be seen that she was not calm. Xiao Jing's eyes also fell on her hands. Seeing her movements, he knew that she was not calm at this time, so the smile on his face became more and more kind. He said, I heard that people from Minister Zhao's mansion came today. Did they make things difficult for our mansion? Xiao Wanru didn't think that it was necessary to tell her about it, but since Xiao Jing said it, she had to answer. She nodded at once and said softly, It's nothing serious. They just talked for a while. Just now, Grandma said that the Chiohue courtyard will be your wedding house. Of course, Xiao Jing understood the meaning of the Chiohue courtyard. He looked at Xiao Wanru calmly again. He really couldn't see much fierceness from his niece. Was it really all because of Prince Jin? Did Prince Jin care about Xiao Wanru so much? This courtyard is good. I lived with your father when I was young, and then it has been empty. Xiao Jing sighed softly with a trace of relief in his eyes. He had a good look and gave people a gentle feeling. At this time, he made people feel more and more favorable. It was hard to believe that such a person was someone who harbored evil intentions. However, one couldn't judge a person by his appearance. Xiao Wanru lowered her head slightly to hide the coldness in her eyes, as if she was thinking of her father and felt infinitely sad. This yard belongs to your father. Now that you've given it to your eldest brother, second uncle has to compensate you. Originally, we had to send you some dowry when you got married, so I'll send 2 more to show my guilt to you, Xiao Jing said with a sigh. That's right. I'll send you 2 more. Xiao Jing sighed. Second uncle, you don't have to do this. The mansion has already given me a lot, so I don't need to give you more. Xiao Wanru refused softly. What he said was true. Because of Great Elder Princess's domineering attitude, Duke Xing's mansion didn't dare to covet this dowry anymore. Most of the dowry fell into their hands, and some of the dowry that hadn't been settled were made up with money. Although some of the money was less, it seemed that it would be made up in this way. Why did Xiao Jing mention the dowry at this time? Hadn't he always avoided this matter? Chapter 844. Your mother's dowry is naturally yours and hers. As for the dowry I gave you, it's also my kind intention. Just accept it. I've been close to your father since I was a child, and I'm closer to him than ordinary brothers. But I didn't expect that my elder brother would, and I didn't expect that he would let you wander outside for so many years. If I had known that you were here, I would have sent someone to pick you up early. Xiao Jing sighed, and the shame on his face became more obvious. Second uncle, no one wants this to happen. Xiao Wanru said softly. She bit her lip and looked as if she didn't want to continue talking about it. She couldn't bear to look back on the past. No matter how much she thought about it, it would only add to her sadness. I'm sorry to you and my elder brother. I should have made up for it. I entrusted the affairs of the inner court to the Jiang family, thinking that the Jiang family would handle it well. But in the end, Wanru, I'm sorry to you. Xiao Jing's voice became more and more sad. Did he mean that what the Jiang family had done before had nothing to do with him? Xiao Wanru's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and then she suppressed the coldness in her heart. She raised her head, shook her head sincerely, and said, Second uncle, these things have nothing to do with me. It's the best that you can think in this way. Although you were raised outside, your nature is the same as my elder brother's. You're an excellent child, but you're different from Ru. Ru also suffered from the current situation. Xiao Jing directed his words to Xiao Yenru. Even his daughter gave such a pertinent evaluation, which showed that he was extremely fair. If Xiao Wanru had not been reborn and had not been secretly supported by Duke Xing in the last life and ended up in such a miserable situation, she would have almost believed it. She felt that her good second uncle was really a good person with good character. It was the Jiang family and Xiao Yenru's fault, which had nothing to do with him. His intention was good, but no one expected that he would end up like this because of his wife and daughter. It was inevitable that a man's wife was unvirtuous and his son was unfilial. This kind of thing couldn't be blamed on him, and it would make others feel sympathetic. However, did her shrewd second uncle really not know about it in the last life? The Jiang family and Xiao Yenru all knew about it, but he, the head of the family, didn't know about it. In Xiao Wanru's opinion, this second uncle not only knew about it, but also had been pushing things forward. Now there was no one else around, so this good second uncle had to come forward. When the water comes to the bottom, the stone has to be revealed. Big sister is now in the deep palace. I don't know how she is doing. Xiao Wanru pretended not to understand Xiao Jing's words and asked softly. Your eldest sister, alas. Xiao Jing sighed softly and found it hard to speak. After a long while, he said, Wanru, I don't want anything from you. I just want you to be nicer to Ru when you meet her in the palace, so that people in the palace don't misunderstand and trample on her. He didn't ask Xiao Wanru to take care of Xiao Yenru in the future, But he asked Xiao Wanru to treat Xiao Yenru a little better when she met Xiao Yenru in the palace in case the people in the palace looked down on Xiao Yenru. This request was too much. Even if Xiao Yenru had wronged Xiao Wanru, she had fallen into such a situation. Moreover, for Xiao Jing's sake, Xiao Wanru shouldn't speak ill of Xiao Yenru when she met Xiao Yenru in the palace. But when she thought about it carefully, she realized that it was useless and meaningless. If Xiao Wanru met Xiao Yenru in the palace in the future, she naturally couldn't speak ill of Xiao Yenru. Otherwise, Xiao Wanru would also be reprimanded. Unlike other places, there were many noble people in the palace. The empress might be very willing to get something on Xiao Wanru. If Xiao Wanru really treated her sister like this, the empress would definitely punish her. Even for her own sake, Xiao Wanru couldn't speak ill of Xiao Yenru in front of everyone. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. She didn't understand Xiao Jing's meaning. He said something here and there in a humble manner, but still said nothing. "Second uncle, don't worry. I will." Xiao Wanru said more and more softly. She looked delicate and delicate. Sitting there with slightly red eyes, she should have been moved. "Well, let's not talk about these sad things. I can't do anything about them now. They asked for it. It would be best if they can get better, but if they can't, this is the only way." Xiao Jing stopped talking, and there was a trace of sadness on his face, but also a little bit of open-mindedness. Xiao Wanru nodded and said only one word. "When your father left, he took some things in the mansion with him. I didn't care about it at first, but these days, I found that a private seal in the mansion was missing. It was your grandfather's, and there were a few pieces of calligraphy written by your grandfather. Wanru, have you seen them in your father's relics?" Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Jing blankly, as if she didn't understand what he meant. She frowned slightly and said after thinking for a while, "Second uncle, I didn't see these in my father's relics." "Didn't you see them?" "But I asked the servants at that time, and they all said that your father took them away. There were only calligraphy and paintings left by your grandfather and a private seal. If they are in Wanru's hands, you can show them to me. I won't take them away and just engrave another seal on them." Xiao Jing said more and more tactfully with a smile on his face. He looked a little kind and rich, not cunning. But the meaning in his words was very cunning. "Second uncle, I really didn't." Xiao Wanru thought for a longer time this time. Xiao Jing didn't urge her. After thinking for a long time, she shook her head and said affirmatively again. "It should be in Big Brother's hands. Wanru, show me your father's relics. Maybe you don't know. Don't worry, I won't really take the seal away." Xiao Jing asked again. This time, he looked a little anxious. If Xiao Wanru hadn't been secretly observing him, she wouldn't have noticed this little change. It seemed like this was the true purpose of this kind and benevolent second uncle. She felt relieved. What she was most afraid of was not others' schemes, but when other schemes hadn't been put on the table. At that time, even if she had been reborn and thought of many things, she might not be able to take the lead. It was already very good for her to guess some things. "Do you still have your father's relics?" Xiao Jing asked. "My father didn't have any relics except the seal and a glass cup. I haven't seen anything else." Xiao Wanru shook her head. What she said was true. These were the two relics Xiao Wanru saw at first, and they were also the key to her recognizing her as her father. But in fact, old Madame Qin asked someone to send a package to her, and some of the things in it were now in Xiao Wanru's place. But she wouldn't let Xiao Jing see them, so she made an excuse. Even if Xiao Jing investigated it, he couldn't find this kind of thing. His grandmother, old Madame Qin, said that few people knew about it, and even Madame D didn't know it. Except for a few conspicuous relics that caught Madame D's attention, the others were not eye-catching, so Madame D didn't spy on them. "Forget it if you don't have them. I'll look for them again. They might be left in other places in the mansion." Xiao Jing's eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face and he looked at her carefully, as if he wanted to see if she was lying, and then he said slowly, "Then look for them again, second uncle." Xiao Wanru nodded. "If you need anything else, just tell me. Although I don't have much ability, I will definitely help you if I can. We are a family, so you can't be estranged because of others." Xiao Jing exhorted. From this aspect, he really looked like a diligent old father, which made people feel good about him. Thank you, second uncle. I know. Xiao Wanru also became more and more gentle. Then you can go back first, Xiao Jing said with a smile. Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed deeply to Xiao Jing, and then turned to leave. Looking at Xiao Wanru's back, the smile on Xiao Jing's face slowly faded and finally became gloomy. Could it be that he was wrong? Was he really not there? But if he was not there, where did he get the previous one from? He reached out to rub his eyebrows. Of course, the more of those calligraphy, the better. In this way, he could increase the bargaining chips at hand. He didn't think of it before, but now he thought of it, so he had to find out the truth. He couldn't give up halfway. He would not give up until he saw his elder brother's relics. Or it might be in Ningyuan Army General's mansion. After all, he was still a child who didn't know anything at that time and couldn't even remember his own background. Come on, invite Ningyuan Army General to our mansion for a small gathering. Thinking of this, he had made up his mind and said coldly. After his originally smiling face straightened, it inexplicably made people feel a kind of chill. Xiao Wanru didn't see Xiao Jing's change of expression, nor did she know that Qin Huaiyong was going to meet Xiao Jing's appointment. She now looked at the young man in front of her in astonishment. She was so surprised that she almost couldn't speak. It turned out to be Yan Shi. When Xiao Wanru was reborn, she hated Yan Shi. But after a period of rebirth, she found that there was something strange about it. In the end, this child Yan also declined. He was different from Wang Xingxue. It was said that Wang Xingxue lived a very good life. They both dealt with her, but why did the two end up so differently? Before meeting Yan Shi, Xiao Wanru didn't want to think too much about other people's affairs. But when she suddenly saw Yan Shi that day, she remembered something. Later, she found that he was the son of Xiao Jing's old friend, which was even more surprising. It was just that this accident had happened in front of him, and it was an accident within an accident. Her watery eyes changed from surprise to indifference, and then became indifferent. She leaned to one side, avoided Yan Shi's salute, and bowed sideways. Child, you're too polite. The two of them almost bumped into each other at the intersection. The intersection was not big, and it was at the corner of a rockery, which blocked people's view. Yan Shi had something on his mind, so he walked fast. He was going to see Duke Xing. This was the outer courtyard, so he was not afraid of bumping into the family members. Unexpectedly, he almost bumped into someone, and it was a Mississippi. If Yan Shi hadn't reacted quickly, he and Yan Shi would have bumped into each other at that time. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.